The carriage door slammed shut like a coffin lid. Clara Whitmore pressed her palm against the rain-streaked window, watching her family's estate shrink into the fog. No one waved. No one followed. Her sister Vivian stood on the portico in a silk gown the color of champagne, radiant and untouched, while Clara disappeared into the November storm wearing borrowed mourning clothes that smelled like someone else's grief. They were sending her north to marry a man who hadn't asked for her. A duke who'd wanted Vivian, beautiful, brilliant Vivian, and would get Clara instead. The unwanted daughter. The acceptable sacrifice. This is a story about what happens when you're chosen by mistake. When you become someone's second option, their consolation prize, their quiet catastrophe. Stay with me until the end. Comment which city you're watching from, because I want to know how far this story travels. Hit that like button if you've ever felt like the substitute, the backup plan, the one nobody actually picked. This is Clara's story, and it starts with a lie. The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. Clara counted each mile north by the rhythm of water against the carriage roof, a relentless drumming that matched the panic building behind her ribs. Across from her sat Mrs. Dalton, her mother's lady's maid, whose pinched expression suggested she'd rather be anywhere else, which made two of them. "Sit up straight," Mrs. Dalton said without looking up from her needlework. "You're going to meet a duke, not a farmhand." Clara straightened, though her corset already made breathing difficult. The dress they'd given her was Vivian's, altered hastily, the seams still showing where they'd been let out to accommodate Clara's broader shoulders, her less fashionable height. It was dove gray, elegant in a subdued way, a dress for a woman who knew her place. She'd worn it to her father's funeral 2 years ago. "How much longer?" Clara asked. "Another day, perhaps. The roads are terrible." Mrs. Dalton's needle moved with mechanical precision. "You should rest. You look exhausted." Clara didn't feel exhausted. She felt erased. 3 weeks ago, she'd been in the library at Whitmore House, cataloging her father's books. It was the only task her mother trusted her with. Quiet work, solitary work, the kind that kept her out of sight when important guests visited. Clara had been content with that. She'd learned early that invisibility was safer than scrutiny. Then the letter arrived. Rowan Hale, Duke of Blackridge, had written to request Vivian's hand in marriage. It was a powerful match, one of the most powerful in the country. The Duke was wealthy, influential, still young enough to be considered a catch, despite his reputation for coldness. Everyone knew he'd been devoted to his late wife, dead these 5 years. The fact that he was seeking to remarry at all was news. That he'd chosen a Whitmore was a miracle. Vivian had read the letter at breakfast, her face perfectly composed. Then she'd set down her teacup and said, "No." Just like that. No. The silence that followed was cavernous. Their mother had gone pale, then red, then pale again. "You don't mean that." "I do." Vivian's voice was calm, almost bored. "I won't marry him. He's a duke. I don't care if he's the king himself. I'm not going to Blackridge Hall to freeze in some northern fortress with a man who's still mourning his dead wife." Vivian had risen from the table, her mourning dress swishing with each precise step. Write back and decline. Politely. But their mother hadn't written back. Instead, 3 days later, she'd summoned Clara to her sitting room. The space always smelled like rosewater and disappointment. Clara had stood in the doorway, hands folded, waiting. "Clara." Her mother didn't look up from her correspondence. "You're going north." The words didn't make sense at first. "North?" "To Blackridge Hall. The Duke's proposal has been accepted." Clara's stomach dropped. "But Vivian said—" "Vivian is not going." Her mother's pen moved across the paper with sharp, angry strokes. "You are." "I don't understand." "The Duke requested a Whitmore daughter. He'll receive one." Her mother finally looked up, and Clara saw something cold and calculating in her gaze. "You should be grateful. This is more than you would have gotten otherwise." Clara's voice came out small. "Does he know that I'm not who he asked for? He knows he's getting a Whitmore bride. The rest is semantics." Her mother returned to her writing. "You leave in 3 days. Mrs. Dalton will accompany you. Try not to embarrass us." That was it. No discussion. No choice. Clara had walked back to the library in a daze, her hands shaking so badly she'd dropped an entire stack of books. They'd hit the floor with a crash that echoed through the empty house. No one came to check on her. Now, in the carriage, Clara pressed her forehead against the cold glass and watched the landscape change. The gentle hills of home gave way to rougher terrain, bare trees, rocky soil, fields that looked harsh even in summer. This was border country, where the land itself seemed to warn you away. Mrs. Dalton, Clara's voice was barely audible over the rain. What if he... She swallowed. What if he sends me back? When he realizes... Mrs. Dalton's needle paused for just a moment, then she resumed her work. Then your mother will deal with that when it happens. It wasn't an answer, it was a dismissal. Clara turned back to the window and watched her reflection, pale, uncertain, forgettable. Everything Vivian wasn't. They reached Blackridge Hall near dusk on the fourth day. Clara saw it first as a silhouette against the dying light, a massive stone structure built into the hillside, all towers and battlements and narrow windows that looked like watchful eyes. It didn't look like a home. It looked like something built to withstand siege. The carriage rolled through iron gates that groaned with age and disuse. The drive was lined with bare oaks whose branches scraped against the November sky like skeletal fingers. Clara's breath fogged the window glass as they approached the main entrance, a set of double doors large enough to admit a mounted knight. "Straighten your bonnet," Mrs. Dalton said, "and for heaven's sake, try to smile." Clara couldn't. Her face felt frozen. The carriage stopped. A footman appeared to open the door, his livery dark and formal. He handed Clara down onto gravel that crunched beneath her shoes like breaking bones. The air was colder here, not just autumn cold, but something deeper, something that seemed to rise from the stones themselves. The main doors opened. A woman emerged, tall, iron-haired, dressed in severe black. Her face was handsome in a harsh way, all angles and sharp judgment. "Miss Whitmore." Her voice matched her appearance. "I am Mrs. Blackwood, the housekeeper. His Grace is occupied this evening. You will be shown to your rooms." Clara opened her mouth to respond, but Mrs. Blackwood had already turned away. They followed her into the hall, a cavernous space with vaulted ceilings that disappeared into shadow. Portraits lined the walls, generations of Hales staring down with expressions ranging from disapproval to outright hostility. The floor was black marble, polished to a mirror shine. Their footsteps echoed. Everything about this place said, "You don't belong here." Mrs. Blackwood led them up a broad staircase, down a corridor, then another. The house seemed to go on forever, room after room of closed doors and drawn curtains. Finally, she stopped before a door painted pale blue, the only spot of color Clara had seen. "Your chambers." Mrs. Blackwood pushed the door open. "Dinner is at 8. Someone will come to collect you." She left without another word. Clara stepped into the room and felt her stomach twist. It was beautiful, more beautiful than anywhere she'd ever slept. The walls were papered in blue silk with silver thread. A four-poster bed dominated the space, its curtains the color of midnight. A fire crackled in a marble fireplace. Fresh flowers sat on the dresser despite the season. Someone had prepared this room with care. For Vivian. Clara sank onto the edge of the bed and put her face in her hands. "Pull yourself together," Mrs. Dalton said from the doorway. "You're not going to cry." "I'm not crying." "Good." Mrs. Dalton set down Clara's trunk with a thud. "Because tears won't help you now. You're here. Make the best of it." She left before Clara could respond. The room was silent except for the fire and the rain against the windows. Clara stood and walked to the dresser, studying her reflection in the mirror. The same face she'd always had, pleasant enough, unremarkable. Brown hair, brown eyes, a mouth that was too wide, cheekbones that weren't quite right, the face of someone designed to blend into the background. A maid appeared at 7:30 to help her dress for dinner. The girl was young, nervous, and said almost nothing as she laced Clara into a dinner gown that had also been Vivian's, dark green with black trim, elegant and subdued. Clara sat still as a doll while the maid arranged her hair, pinning it up in a style that felt too formal, too exposed. "There, miss," the maid whispered. "You look lovely." Clara didn't feel lovely. She felt like an imposter wearing someone else's clothes, about to meet someone who'd asked for someone else entirely. At 8 o'clock precisely, Mrs. Blackwood appeared. "Follow me." The dining room was on the ground floor, down yet another maze of corridors. Mrs. Blackwood walked quickly, her keys jangling at her waist. She stopped before a set of double doors and turned to Clara with an expression that might have been pity. "His Grace values honesty above all else," she said quietly. "Remember that." Then she opened the doors and announced, "Miss Clara Whitmore." The dining room was smaller than Clara expected, intimate even. A fire roared in a fireplace large enough to stand in. The table was set for two, the candles casting warm light across silver and crystal. At the far end of the table, a man rose to his feet. Rowan Hale, Duke of Blackridge. Clara's first thought was that he looked tired. Not old, he couldn't have been more than 35, but worn in a way that suggested years of insufficient sleep and too much responsibility. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in simple dark clothes that emphasized rather than concealed his physical presence. His hair was dark with threads of premature gray. His face was all hard lines, a strong jaw, a straight nose, eyes that were startlingly blue even in the candlelight. He was handsome in a forbidding way, like a monument carved from granite. Those blue eyes fixed on Clara, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. "Miss Whitmore." His voice was deep, controlled. "Welcome to Blackridge Hall." Clara curtsied, her knees shaking. "Your Grace." A pause. He was still looking at her, his expression unreadable. "Please," he said finally. "Sit." She moved to the chair Mrs. Blackwood held out for her, several feet down from where the Duke stood. He waited until she was seated before taking his own chair. A footman appeared to pour wine. The silence stretched. Clara folded her hands in her lap and stared at her plate. White porcelain with a delicate gold rim. She counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3. "I apologize for not greeting you upon your arrival," Rowan said. "Estate business required my attention." "Of course, Your Grace." Another silence. "I trust your journey was not too difficult?" "The weather was poor, but we managed well enough." "Good." The first course arrived, a clear soup that Clara had no appetite for. She picked up her spoon with trembling fingers and tried to eat. Across from her, Rowan did the same, his movements precise and economical. He didn't look at her again. They ate in silence for several minutes. Clara's mind raced, searching for something to say, some way to fill the terrible quiet. But every possible topic felt dangerous. The weather? Trivial. The house? Presumptuous. Her family? Catastrophic. Finally, Rowan set down his spoon. "Miss Whitmore?" He looked directly at her, and Clara felt her heart stutter. "I must ask you a question, and I require an honest answer." This was it. He knew. He'd figured it out somehow, and now he was going to send her home in disgrace. "Of course, Your Grace." "Did you wish to come here?" The question caught her completely off guard. I'm sorry?" "To Blackridge. To this marriage." His expression hadn't changed, but something in his voice had sharpened. "Did you choose this, or was it chosen for you?" Clara's mouth went dry. The honest answer was simple. She'd been sent here like a package, addressed and delivered. But admitting that felt like admitting she was worthless. She swallowed hard. "I understand this is a great honor, Your Grace." "That's not what I asked." His gaze was relentless. Clara looked down at her hands, her throat tight. "No," she said quietly. "I did not choose this." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, unexpectedly, Rowan said, "Neither did I." Clara's head snapped up. He was watching her with something that might have been sympathy. "My advisors insisted I remarry. For heirs, for alliances, for a dozen political reasons that all sound equally tedious." He picked up his wine glass, studying the dark liquid. "I wrote to your family because the Whitmores have a good name and your sister's reputation preceded her. But I did not wake one morning burning with desire to take a wife." Clara didn't know what to say to that. "However," Rowan continued, "we are here nonetheless, both of us trapped by duty and expectation." He looked at her again. So I propose we begin with honesty, at least. Can you offer me that much? Something in Clara's chest loosened slightly. Yes, Your Grace. Rowan, he said. When we're alone, you may call me Rowan. That's very kind. It's not kind. It's practical. He set down his glass. I have no interest in formality within my own home. Life is short enough without wasting it on titles. The footman brought the next course, roasted pheasant with root vegetables. Clara cut into her meat mechanically, her mind spinning. This wasn't going at all like she'd expected. Tell me about yourself, Rowan said abruptly. Clara nearly dropped her fork. About myself? Yes, your interests, your opinions, your personality. He said it as if testing an unfamiliar word. If we're to be married, I should know something beyond your name and lineage. This was dangerous territory. The truth was that Clara had spent her entire life being unremarkable on purpose, fading into the background, cultivating invisibility as a survival skill. She had interests, yes. She loved reading, loved languages, loved the way ideas could build on each other like architectural structures. But she'd learned early not to discuss these things. Her mother called her bookish. Vivienne called her peculiar. Even the tutors had seemed faintly embarrassed by her enthusiasm. Clara searched for something safe to say. I enjoy reading, Your Grace. Rowan, what do you read? History, mostly. Some philosophy, poetry, occasionally, though I'm not very good at understanding it. Which philosophers? The question surprised her. Recently, I've been reading Locke, his essays on human understanding, though I find some of his arguments about innate ideas unconvincing. Rowan's eyebrow rose slightly. Unconvincing? Clara felt heat climb her neck. I'm sorry, that probably sounds… No. He leaned forward slightly, and for the first time she saw genuine interest in his expression. Explain. Why unconvincing? Clara hesitated. This felt like a trap. But his face was open, waiting. He argues that the mind begins as a blank slate, she said slowly. That all knowledge comes from experience. But I think that ignores too much. How do we explain universal concepts that appear across all cultures? Mathematical truths? Moral intuitions? If everything truly came from experience alone, wouldn't we see more variance? Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Leibniz would agree with you. Leibniz has his own problems, Clara said before she could stop herself. His monadology is philosophically interesting, but practically useless. A smile tugged at the corner of Rowan's mouth, the first hint of warmth she'd seen. You've read Leibniz. My father had a comprehensive library. Clara took a sip of wine to steady herself. Before he died, I spent a great deal of time there. And now? Now the books are still there. I catalog them sometimes. My mother prefers I stay occupied with quiet tasks. The smile faded from Rowan's face. I see. They ate in silence for a few minutes, but it felt different now, less oppressive, more contemplative. Miss Whitmore, Rowan said finally. Clara, may I ask you another question? Of course. Why did your mother send you instead of your sister? Clara's fork clattered against her plate. So he knew. Of course he knew. She looked at him and found his expression serious, but not angry, just curious. I don't know, she said quietly. Vivienne refused the match. My mother decided I would do instead. And you simply accepted this? What choice did I have? The words came out sharper than intended. Clara immediately regretted them. I'm sorry, that was honest, Rowan interrupted, which is what I asked for. He studied her for a long moment. Your sister refused me. Yes. Do you know why? Clara thought about Vivienne's words at breakfast. She said she wouldn't freeze in a northern fortress with a man still mourning his dead wife. Something flickered across Rowan's face, pain maybe, or anger. Then it was gone. A reasonable concern, he said dryly. He pushed his plate away and stood. Clara started to rise, but he gestured for her to remain seated. Finish your meal. I have work to attend to. He walked toward the door, then paused. Clara. She looked up. "Thank you," he said, "for your honesty. It's rarer than you might think." Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone in the dining room with half a pheasant and a head full of confusion. The days that followed developed a strange rhythm. Clara saw Rowan at dinner each evening. They spoke, about books mostly, and occasionally about estate business or politics. The conversations were stilted at first, full of awkward pauses and careful politeness. But slowly, incrementally, they began to find a kind of ease. Rowan was nothing like Clara had expected. He wasn't cold, exactly, but reserved. A man who'd learned to keep his thoughts behind walls. He rarely smiled, rarely laughed, rarely showed anything beyond controlled courtesy. But when they discussed ideas, she saw glimpses of something else. A sharp intelligence, a dry humor, a hunger for intellectual challenge that matched her own. It was the strangest thing, being interesting to someone. During the days, Clara explored the house. Blackridge Hall was enormous, full of rooms that hadn't been opened in years. She found a music room with a pianoforte covered in dust sheets, a conservatory where dead plants stood in cracked pots, a portrait gallery where generations of Hales stared down with varying degrees of disapproval, and a library. Clara discovered it on her third day behind a door she'd assumed led to a closet. She pushed it open and stopped dead. The room was 2 stories tall, lined floor to ceiling with books. Thousands of them. More books than she'd ever seen in one place. The smell hit her first, leather and paper, and that particular mustiness that meant knowledge preserved. Late afternoon light streamed through tall windows, turning dust motes into floating gold. Clara walked into the center of the room and turned in a slow circle, her heart pounding. This was a library built by someone who loved books. Not for show, not for status, but for reading. She could see it in the organization, history grouped with history, philosophy with philosophy, but also gaps where volumes had been removed and not replaced, suggesting regular use. A chair sat by the window, its cushion worn. A small table held a stack of books with markers still in them. Someone read here. Recently. Clara pulled a volume at random, a collection of Montaigne's essays, French text on one side, English translation on the other. She opened it and found notes in the margins, written in a tight, controlled hand. Rowan's hand. She was standing there reading his marginalia when the door opened behind her. "I wondered when you'd find this room." Clara spun around, nearly dropping the book. Rowan stood in the doorway, still in his riding clothes, mud on his boots. "I'm sorry," Clara stammered. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not intruding." He walked into the room, pulling off his gloves. "This library belongs to the household. You're part of the household now." "I saw your notes," Clara said, then immediately wished she hadn't. But Rowan didn't look angry. He came to stand beside her, looking at the open book. Montaigne, of experience, one of his better essays. "You disagree with his conclusion," Clara said, pointing to a marginal note. "I do. He argues that experience teaches us moderation, but I think experience more often teaches us caution. They're not the same thing. Caution can be wise. Caution can be cowardice." Clara looked at him. "You don't strike me as a coward." Rowan's mouth quirked. "You've known me less than a week." "Long enough to see you're not afraid of uncomfortable conversations." "Perhaps I'm simply bad at avoiding them." He took the book from her hands and returned it to its shelf with the precision of someone who knew exactly where it belonged. "Do you ride, Clara?" The change of subject threw her. "Ride? Horses. Do you ride?" Yes, a little. It's been some time." "I'll have the stable master prepare a mount for you. The grounds are extensive. You should see them." It wasn't quite an invitation, but Clara treated it as one. "I'd like that." "Tomorrow morning, then, after breakfast." He headed for the door, then paused. "Clara." "Yes?" "Feel free to borrow any books you like. Read in here whenever you wish. He seemed to struggle with the words. "I'm pleased someone else will use this room. It's been quiet too long." He left before she could respond. Clara stood in the library, surrounded by thousands of books, and one strange, growing feeling. Maybe this wouldn't be completely unbearable, after all. They rode out the next morning under a sky that threatened rain but hadn't yet delivered on the threat. The stable master, A grizzled man named Peters had prepared a gentle mare for Clara, gray with kind eyes. "She's steady, miss," Peters said as he helped Clara mount. "Won't spook easy." Rowan sat astride a massive black gelding that looked like it could trample armies. He controlled the beast with easy competence, barely touching the reins. They set off at a walk, following a path that led away from the hall and into the hills. The land here was rough and beautiful, all rocky outcrops and windswept grass. The trees were bare, but Clara could imagine how they'd look in summer, full of green. "This is the north boundary," Rowan said, pointing to a line of stones half buried in the hillside. "Blackridge lands extend to the river in the east, the forest in the west, about 12,000 acres altogether." "It's beautiful," Clara said. "It's harsh, but yes, beautiful in its way." They rode in companionable silence for a while. Clara was out of practice, her thighs already aching, but she didn't want to complain. The air was cold and clean, and for the first time since leaving home, she felt like she could breathe properly. "Tell me about your sister," Rowan said abruptly. Clara tensed. "What would you like to know?" "Why she refused me. The real reason, not the polite excuse." Clara guided her mare around a fallen branch, buying time. "I don't know if I can answer that. Vivian doesn't share her reasoning with me." "Are you close?" "No." The word came out more bitter than Clara intended. Rowan glanced at her. "Why not?" Clara considered lying, but he'd asked for honesty, and somehow, out here on the empty hillside, the truth felt safer. "Vivian is beautiful," she said slowly. "Charming, accomplished, everything a woman of our class should be. I'm none of those things. She's the daughter my mother wanted. I'm the other one." "The spare," Rowan said quietly. "Exactly." They rode on. The wind picked up, bringing the smell of coming rain. "My brother was the spare," Rowan said. "James. He died when I was 23. Clara looked at him in surprise. "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago." But his jaw was tight. "He drowned in a sailing accident. Stupid, preventable. I was supposed to be with him that day, but I'd stayed behind to meet with the estate steward. Duty over pleasure. That's not your fault." "Isn't it?" Rowan's voice was harsh. "If I'd gone with him, maybe I could have—" He stopped himself. Clara chose her next words carefully. "My father used to say that guilt is just love with nowhere to go." Rowan pulled his horse to a stop and looked at her. Really looked at her, for the first time since they'd met. Clara felt exposed under that gaze, but she didn't look away. "Your father sounds like he was a wise man," Rowan said finally. "He was. I miss him. How long has he been gone?" 2 years. It was sudden. A fever. 1 week he was fine, the next—" Clara swallowed hard. "My mother retreated into her rooms for 6 months. Vivian planned the funeral. I sat in the library and read his books, trying to feel close to him again." "And did it work?" "Sometimes. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I could almost hear his voice in the margins." Rowan's expression softened. "I understand that." They stood there for a moment, two people who'd lost things they couldn't recover, surrounded by miles of empty land. Then the rain started. It came suddenly, the way autumn rain does in the north, cold and hard and unforgiving. Within seconds, they were both soaked. "Back to the hall," Rowan said, wheeling his horse around. They galloped back, the rain lashing at their faces. Clara's hat flew off somewhere on the hillside. Her hair came loose from its pins. By the time they reached the stables, she was shivering violently, her clothes plastered to her skin. Peters rushed out with blankets. "Your Grace, miss, get inside. Quickly now." But Rowan was laughing. Actually laughing. A deep, genuine sound that transformed his entire face. "Did you see your hat?" he asked Clara. "It went spinning off like a bird." "I looked ridiculous," Clara said, but she was laughing too, breathless and freezing and somehow absurdly happy. "We both looked ridiculous." Rowan's hair was dripping into his eyes. "Mrs. Blackwood is going to murder us for tracking mud through her clean floors. Then we'd better hurry." They ran for the house like children, laughing and slipping on wet stone, leaving Peter shaking his head behind them. Inside, they stood in the entrance hall, dripping and ridiculous. Mrs. Blackwood appeared, took one look at them, and sighed. Upstairs, both of you. I'll send hot water and dry clothes. Yes, Mrs. Blackwood, they said in unison, and that set them laughing again. Clara climbed the stairs with water squelching in her boots, her dress ruined, her hair a disaster. She should have felt miserable. Instead, she felt electric. Dinner that night was different. Rowan was waiting when Clara came down, and for the first time he smiled when he saw her. Not a polite smile, a real one. Your hair, he said. Clara touched the still damp curls she hadn't been able to completely tame. The rain won. I surrendered. It looks nice, less formal? I was going to say less frightened. Clara blinked. Frightened? You've looked frightened since you arrived. Understandably. Rowan pulled out her chair himself instead of waiting for the footman. But tonight you look like someone who just won a fight with weather and came out victorious. Clara sat, feeling strangely pleased. I've never been victorious over anything before. Then this is a momentous evening. They ate and they talked, and for the first time it felt easy. Rowan told her about the estate, about the tenants and their concerns, about his plans for the next planting season. Clara listened, asked questions, offered opinions when he seemed to want them. You have good instincts, he said at one point. That suggestion about the western fields, rotating crops there, that's sound. I don't know anything about farming. You know about systems. I heard it in the way you argued with Locke. You understand how pieces fit together. He topped up her wine. That's rarer and more valuable than technical knowledge. Clara felt warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. Thank you. I'm not being kind. I'm being accurate. After dinner, instead of retreating to his study, Rowan walked Clara to the library. I thought you might want this, he said, handing her a book. It arrived yesterday. Clara looked at the spine. A new translation of Dante's Inferno, Italian on one side, English on the other. The exact edition she'd mentioned wanting 2 nights ago. You remembered, she said softly. Of course I remembered. He said it as if it were obvious. Read it. Tell me what you think. He left her there in the library with the book and the lamplight and a feeling she couldn't quite name. It felt dangerously like hope. The next 2 weeks unfolded like pages in a book Clara hadn't known she was writing. She and Rowan fell into a pattern that felt almost natural. Breakfast together in the small dining room, rides through the estate when weather permitted, dinners that stretched late into the evening as they debated everything from agricultural policy to whether Shakespeare's tragedies were actually about fate or just poor decision-making. Clara discovered Rowan had opinions on nearly everything and wasn't shy about defending them, even when she challenged him, especially when she challenged him. You're wrong about Hamlet, she said one evening over roasted lamb. He's not indecisive. He's careful. He spends 5 acts failing to do the one thing he needs to do, Rowan countered. That's not careful. That's paralysis. Or it's intelligence. He's verifying the ghost's claims, ensuring he has proof before committing murder, which gives Claudius time to send him to England to be executed. Caution becomes cowardice when it costs you everything. Clara set down her fork, studying him. You really believe that? That careful thought is cowardice? I believe overthinking can be as dangerous as not thinking at all. Rowan's jaw was tight. Sometimes you have to act, even when you're not certain. There was something underneath his words, something personal. Clara wanted to ask, but the footman entered to clear their plates, and the moment passed. Still, she filed it away. Rowan Hale was a man who valued action over deliberation, who'd chosen decisiveness over doubt somewhere in his past, probably painfully. The library became Clara's refuge. She spent hours there, surrounded by books and silence, occasionally looking up to find Rowan working at the desk by the window. They didn't always talk. Sometimes they just existed in the same space, reading separately, and Clara found a strange comfort in that. She'd never had companionable silence before. At home, silence meant absence or disapproval. Here, it meant presence. One afternoon, she was deep in the Dante translation when Rowan spoke without looking up from his ledgers. What circle of hell would you put me in? Clara blinked. What? Dante's Inferno. You've been reading it for days. I'm curious. Which circle of hell do you think suits me? He glanced up with a slight smile. Be honest. Clara considered. That depends. Have you committed simony, fraud, or treachery? Not recently. Then you're probably safe from the lower circles. She closed the book. Though I suppose we all end up somewhere. Even the virtuous pagans get limbo. Limbo, Rowan repeated. The first circle. Not quite hell, but not paradise either. Just suspended. Does that feel familiar? His smile faded. More than I'd like. Before Clara could ask what he meant, Mrs. Blackwood appeared in the doorway, her face pinched with disapproval. Your Grace, Lady Margrave has arrived. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Rowan stood slowly, his expression shuddering closed. I wasn't informed we were expecting guests. She says she sent word ahead 3 days ago. Mrs. Blackwood's tone suggested she believed no such word had been sent. Show her to the drawing room. I'll be there shortly. Rowan waited until Mrs. Blackwood left, then turned to Clara. I apologize. This is unexpected. Who is Lady Margrave? My late wife's mother. He said it flatly, without inflection. She visits occasionally, usually without warning. Clara felt ice settle in her stomach. Should I? Come with me. It wasn't a request. You'll meet her eventually, might as well be now. They walked to the drawing room in tense silence. Clara could feel Rowan's mood darkening with each step, the easy companionship of the past weeks evaporating like mist. By the time they reached the door, he looked like the man she'd met that first night, remote, guarded, prepared for battle. He opened the door. The woman who stood by the fireplace was tall and elegant, dressed in deep purple that emphasized her pale skin and silver hair. She must have been beautiful once. She was striking still, in a cold, precise way. Her eyes were gray, sharp as glass. Rowan? Her voice was cultured, controlled. You look well. Catherine. Rowan's tone was perfectly neutral. You should have written ahead. I did write. Perhaps your staff is becoming inefficient. Those gray eyes slid to Clara, cataloging her in an instant. And who is this? Miss Clara Whitmore, Rowan said. My betrothed. Clara, this is Lady Catherine Margrave. Catherine's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Surprise? Displeasure? Clara couldn't tell. Miss Whitmore. Catherine's gaze swept over Clara's simple day dress, her loose hair, the book still clutched in her hand. How unexpected. A pleasure to meet you, Lady Margrave, Clara said, curtsying. I was under the impression you were courting Vivian Whitmore. Catherine directed this at Rowan, as if Clara weren't standing right there. The eldest daughter. Plans changed, Rowan said shortly. I see. Catherine moved to the sofa and sat with the precision of a chess piece being placed. Do sit, Miss Whitmore. I'm sure we have much to discuss. It was a test. Clara recognized it instinctively, the tone that was polite on the surface but patronizing beneath, the way Catherine sat while they stood, the casual dismissal in every syllable. Clara sat. She placed her book on the table beside her, spine up so the title showed, Dante's Inferno, and folded her hands in her lap. Tea, Mrs. Blackwood, Rowan said to the housekeeper hovering in the doorway. Then he took the chair beside Clara, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. A statement of position. So, Catherine said, still focused on Clara, the younger sister. How fortunate for you. I consider myself very fortunate, Clara said evenly. I'm sure you do. To secure such an advantageous match when your sister, the more suitable choice one assumes, declined it. Catherine smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. One might wonder why she refused. The words hung in the air like poison. Rowan's voice was ice. Catherine, I'm simply curious, darling. After all, you were devoted to my daughter for 6 years. One would think you'd choose carefully when seeking a replacement. Catherine turned that cold smile on Rowan. I was quite surprised to hear of your engagement. So soon after our last conversation about Eleanor, Clara felt Rowan go rigid beside her. We're not discussing Eleanor, he said quietly. Why not? She was your wife, my daughter. Surely Miss Whitmore should know about the woman whose place she's taking. I'm not taking anyone's place, Clara said. The words came out before she could stop them. I'm here because I was sent here. Not by choice, not by scheming, but because my mother decided to trade me for a connection. If that offends you, Lady Margrave, then we have something in common." Silence crashed through the room. Catherine stared at her. Rowan stared at her. Mrs. Blackwood, entering with the tea tray, nearly dropped it. Claire's heart hammered. She'd just been unforgivably rude to a lady of higher rank in front of witnesses, in what amounted to a confession that she was second choice. Her mother would be horrified. Vivian would laugh. But Clara found she didn't care. "How refreshingly honest," Catherine said finally. Her tone had changed, less contemptuous, more calculating. Most women would have prettied that up considerably. "I'm not most women." "Clearly." Catherine accepted tea from Mrs. Blackwood without breaking eye contact. "Tell me, Miss Whitmore, what do you know about Blackridge Hall?" "Very little. I've been here only 2 weeks." "Then let me educate you. This house was Eleanor's great project. She restored it room by room, brought life back to a place that had been dying for decades. The library you've been using, she organized it. The gardens you walk through, she designed them. Every beautiful thing here is her legacy." Clara felt the words like blows. She'd been reading in Eleanor's library, walking in Eleanor's gardens, living in Eleanor's house. "Catherine," Rowan's voice was dangerously soft. "That's enough." "Is it? Or is it kind to warn the girl what she's walking into?" Catherine set down her teacup with a delicate click. "You haven't changed anything, Rowan. Her portrait still hangs in the gallery. Her rooms are kept exactly as she left them. You visit her grave every week without fail. Do you really think you can simply install a new wife and pretend the past never happened?" "I'm not pretending anything." "Then what are you doing?" Catherine leaned forward. "Eleanor has been gone 5 years. 5 years, and you still can't let her go. How is that fair to this girl?" Clara found her voice. "Perhaps that's between Rowan and me." Catherine's laugh was sharp. "Oh, you have spirit. Good. You'll need it." She stood, smoothing her skirts. "I'll be staying the night, Rowan. We can continue this conversation at dinner." "No," Rowan said. "You'll stay for tea and then you'll leave." Catherine's eyebrows rose. "I've come a long way." "I don't care if you've come from China. You'll leave before dinner, or I'll have Peters drive you to the village inn himself." Rowan stood, his face like granite. "You're welcome in this house as Eleanor's mother, but you will not weaponize her memory against Clara. Not in my home. Not ever." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Catherine picked up her gloves. "Very well." She pulled them on with sharp, precise movements. "But we will discuss this eventually, Rowan. You can't hide from grief forever." "I'm not hiding. I'm moving forward." "Are you?" Catherine walked to the door, then paused. "Miss Whitmore, a word of advice, from one woman to another. Don't try to replace Eleanor. You'll only destroy yourself trying." Then she was gone, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Clara sat frozen, her hands clenched in her lap. The tea had gone cold. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the house, a door slammed. Rowan sank back into his chair and put his face in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said, muffled. "I'm sorry." Clara didn't trust her voice. She stood, smoothed her dress, and walked to the window. Outside, the afternoon light slanted across the gardens. Eleanor's gardens, turning everything gold. "Did you love her?" The question came out barely above a whisper. A long pause. Then, "Yes." "Do you still?" I don't know." Rowan's voice was raw. "How do you measure that? She's been gone so long, sometimes I can't remember her face without looking at the portrait, but the guilt is still there. The feeling that I should have done something differently, been someone different." Clara turned to look at him. He was still sitting with his head in his hands, shoulders hunched, looking more defeated than she'd ever seen him. "What happened to her?" "Fever. Like your father." Rowan lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed. "She was sick for 2 weeks. The doctors tried everything. Nothing worked. I sat beside her bed and watched her slip away, and there was nothing I could do. Nothing. That's not your fault." "Isn't it? I was supposed to protect her. That's what a husband does. And I failed." Clara crossed back to him and did something she'd never dared before. She reached out and took his hand. His fingers were cold. My father died while I was reading in the library, she said quietly. I didn't even know he'd gotten worse. No one told me. I found out when the maids started covering the mirrors. Her throat tightened. For months, I convinced myself that if I'd been paying attention, if I'd checked on him instead of hiding in the books, maybe I could have, I don't know, done something, gotten help faster, something. Rowan's hand tightened around hers. But you couldn't have, Clara continued. Just like I couldn't have. Fever doesn't care how much we love someone. It doesn't care about duty or attention or guilt. It just takes. You sound very certain. I'm not certain about anything. Clara sat beside him, still holding his hand. But I'm certain that destroying yourself over something you couldn't control doesn't honor the dead. It just creates more casualties. They sat in silence for a long time. The light changed. The fire burned low. Finally, Rowan spoke. Catherine is right about one thing. I haven't changed anything in this house. Eleanor's rooms are still locked. Her portrait is still hanging. I kept everything exactly as it was, like a museum to a marriage that ended 5 years ago. Why? Because changing it felt like forgetting, and forgetting felt like betrayal. He looked at Clara, his blue eyes intense. But you're here now, living in Eleanor's shadow, and that's not fair to you. I knew what I was walking into, Clara said. Or at least, I knew there would be a ghost in this house. Most second marriages have them. You're not a second marriage. We're not even married yet. Rowan stood abruptly, pulling his hand free. You could still leave. Go home, tell your mother I released you from the engagement. You don't have to stay here and compete with a memory. The offer should have been tempting. Clara could return to Whitmore House, to the library and the invisibility and the safety of being nobody's problem. But the thought made her feel sick. Do you want me to leave? She asked. Rowan stopped pacing. No. Then I'm not going anywhere. Clara, I'm not going anywhere, she repeated, stronger now. I didn't choose to come here, but I'm choosing to stay. Not because I'm trying to replace Eleanor or compete with her memory, but because for the first time in my life, someone actually listens when I speak. Someone cares what I think. Her voice caught. Someone sees me. Rowan stared at her. Then, in 2 strides, he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was sudden, fierce, almost desperate. Clara froze for a heartbeat, then wrapped her arms around him and held on. He smelled like leather and smoke and something else, something essentially him. His heart hammered against her cheek. I see you, he said into her hair. I see you, Clara Whitmore, and you're not second to anyone. They stood there, holding each other in the fading light, while outside Catherine's carriage rolled away down the drive. When they finally pulled apart, Rowan's face was set with determination. Come with me, he said. He led her upstairs, down a corridor she'd never walked, to a door painted white with gold trim. He pulled a key from his pocket, the only key Clara had ever seen him carry, and unlocked it. The room beyond was frozen in time. A 4-poster bed with pale blue curtains, a vanity covered with perfume bottles and hairbrushes, watercolors on the walls, landscapes mostly, rendered in soft colors. Books stacked on the nightstand, a shawl draped over a chair as if its owner had just stepped out and would return any moment. Eleanor's room. I haven't been in here since she died, Rowan said quietly. The staff cleans it, but nothing has been moved. Clara walked slowly through the space, feeling like an intruder. Everything was beautiful, delicate, carefully chosen. The woman who'd lived here had taste and wealth and time to cultivate beauty. Everything Clara wasn't. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Because it's time. Rowan crossed to the wardrobe and opened it. Dresses hung in neat rows, silks and satins in pale colors. These should be donated. The perfume bottles should be cleared. The room should be... Are you ready for that? He paused. I don't know. But I know I can't keep you living in the shadow of a shrine. He turned to face her. Help me. Rowan, please. I need someone to help me let go. Clara looked at him. This man who'd spent 5 years frozen in grief, who'd built walls around his heart and lived in a house full of ghosts, who was asking her now to help him tear those walls down. It was terrifying. It was also the most honest thing anyone had ever asked of her. "Okay," Clara said, "we'll do it together." They spent the next 3 hours sorting through Eleanor's belongings. It was painful work. Every item had a story. This dress she'd worn to a ball, these gloves she'd loved, this book she'd been reading when she fell ill. Rowan's voice broke more than once. Clara found herself crying for a woman she'd never met, mourning a loss that wasn't hers, but somehow felt universal. By the time they finished, 3 trunks were packed for donation. The room had been stripped of its most personal items, and Rowan looked exhausted but lighter. "Thank you," he said as they stood in the now bare room. "I couldn't have done that alone." "You're not alone," Clara said. He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he leaned down and kissed her forehead, gentle, careful, like she was something precious. "We should dress for dinner," he said softly. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. They walked back to the main corridor together. At the junction where their paths split, his room's to the right, hers to the left, Rowan caught her hand. "Clara, what you said earlier about choosing to stay." "Yes?" "I'm glad you did." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "More glad than I can properly express." He was still holding her hand when Mrs. Blackwood appeared at the end of the corridor. "Your Grace?" The housekeeper's face was pale. "There are guests, multiple carriages on the drive." Rowan frowned. "I'm not expecting anyone." "No, Your Grace, they say they're from the Whitmore estate." Clara's stomach dropped. "What?" Mrs. Blackwood looked miserable. "Your mother has arrived, Miss Whitmore, and your sister." The world tilted. Vivian was here. Rowan's hand tightened on Clara's. "When did they arrive?" "Just now. They're in the entrance hall. Lady Whitmore demands to speak with you immediately." Clara felt panic rising in her throat. Her mother, Vivian, here. Now. Why? What could possibly... "Clara." Rowan turned her to face him. "Look at me." She met his eyes. "Whatever this is," he said, "we handle it together. Understand?" Clara nodded, even though she didn't understand anything. They walked downstairs together, still holding hands. With each step, Clara felt her old self creeping back, the quiet girl, the invisible daughter, the one who didn't matter. But Rowan's grip was firm, steady, anchoring her. They reached the entrance hall. Lady Whitmore stood in the center of the space like a general surveying a battlefield. She was dressed in traveling clothes, her face set in hard lines. Behind her stood Vivian, resplendent in a blue dress that made her look like a painting come to life. When Vivian saw Clara, she smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Hello, little sister," Vivian said. "We need to talk." Lady Whitmore's gaze moved from Clara to Rowan to their joined hands. Her expression turned glacial. "Your Grace," she said, her voice clipped. "We need to discuss a serious matter, in private." "Anything you need to say can be said in front of Clara," Rowan replied. "I think not." Lady Whitmore drew herself up. "This concerns the validity of your engagement. You see, there's been a terrible mistake." Clara's heart stopped. "No mistake," Rowan said coldly. "I'm engaged to Clara. The contracts have been signed." "Signed under false pretenses." Lady Whitmore pulled a letter from her reticule. "You wrote to request Vivian's hand, not Clara's. The substitution was made without your knowledge or consent. That makes the contract invalid. The contract specifies a Whitmore daughter. Clara is a Whitmore daughter." "Don't be obtuse. You know very well which daughter you wanted." Lady Whitmore handed him the letter. "Your own words. Miss Vivian Whitmore, whose grace and accomplishments are well known. You never mentioned Clara, never even asked if there was another daughter." Rowan took the letter but didn't read it. "Circumstances changed." "Then let me change them back." Lady Whitmore gestured to Vivian. "My eldest daughter has reconsidered. She's willing to honor the match you proposed." Vivian stepped forward. She looked beautiful, poised, perfect, everything a duchess should be. "I made a mistake," Vivian said, her voice like honey. "I let fear cloud my judgment, but I've had time to reflect and I realize now what an honor you were offering." Her eyes met Rowan's. "I want to accept, if you'll still have me." The silence was deafening, Clara felt the floor dropping away beneath her. This was it, the moment everything ended. Rowan would send her home, marry Vivian, and Clara would go back to being nobody. The invisible daughter. The substitute who was never meant to last. Her hand started to slip from Rowan's, but he didn't let go. "No," Rowan said. Lady Whitmore blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "I said no." Rowan handed the letter back without looking at it. "I'm engaged to Clara. That engagement stands." "You can't be serious. I've never been more serious," Rowan's voice was steel. "Your daughter, Vivian, refused my proposal. I don't give second chances, Lady Whitmore. Not in business, not in politics, and certainly not in marriage." Vivian's composure cracked slightly. "But surely you made your choice," Rowan said, looking at her directly. "I've made mine. You chose wrong." Lady Whitmore's face had gone red. She's not suitable. She has no accomplishments, no connections, no beauty to speak of." "Stop." The word cracked like a whip. Rowan's eyes blazed. "You will not speak about my betrothed that way. Not in my house, not anywhere." "I'm her mother." "Then you should be ashamed." Rowan pulled Clara closer. "This woman has more intelligence, more courage, more genuine worth than half the society wives in England. She stood beside me, challenged me, made me think and feel things I'd forgotten I was capable of. And you sent her here like an unwanted package because you thought she was expendable." Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at him. "You're making a mistake," Lady Whitmore said coldly. "The only mistake I made was not seeing Clara's value immediately." Rowan turned to Vivian. "You refused me because you thought I was still mourning my wife. You were right, I was. But your sister helped me move forward. She gave me something I didn't even know I needed, honest companionship, a true partnership. I'm not giving that up." Vivian's face had gone white. For the first time in Clara's life, her sister looked genuinely shaken. "This is absurd," Lady Whitmore snapped. "I'll contest the contracts. You'll leave." Rowan's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Now, both of you. And you'll never come back unless you're specifically invited." "You'll regret this," Lady Whitmore hissed. "No, Lady Whitmore, you'll regret this. You threw away a daughter worth keeping for the sake of a daughter, too shallow to see what she was refusing." Rowan gestured to the door. "Goodbye." For a moment, Clara thought her mother might actually explode. Then, with a fury that could have melted iron, Lady Whitmore turned on her heel and stalked toward the door. Vivian lingered for one moment more, her eyes meeting Clara's. "You won't last," she said quietly. "You're not enough for him. You never will be." Then she followed their mother out into the gathering darkness. The front doors slammed shut. The carriages rolled away. Silence flooded the hall. Clara stood there, shaking, still holding Rowan's hand. She couldn't process what had just happened, couldn't believe. "Clara!" Rowan turned her to face him. "Are you all right?" She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "You chose me," she whispered. "Of course I chose you. But she's everything I'm not." "Exactly." Rowan cupped her face in his hands. "She's beautiful and polished and completely hollow. You're real. You have thoughts and opinions and flaws and fire. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Tears were streaming down Clara's face. "I thought you'd send me back." "Never." His voice was fierce. "I meant what I said. You've given me something I didn't know I was missing, and I'm not letting that go. I'm not letting you go." Clara launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck. He caught her, held her, buried his face in her hair. "I was so scared," she sobbed into his shoulder. "I know, I'm sorry, I should have told them to leave the moment they arrived." "You defended me." "Of course I did. You're mine to defend." He pulled back enough to look at her. "Clara, I know we've only known each other a few weeks. I know this started as an arrangement, not a choice. But somewhere along the way, it became real for me. You became real. And I need you to know I love you," Clara blurted out. Rowan went very still. Clara's eyes widened. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. That was completely inappropriate." "Say it again." "What?" "Say it again." His voice was rough with emotion. Clara swallowed. I love you. Rowan kissed her. It wasn't gentle or careful or polite. It was fierce and desperate and real, a claiming and a surrender all at once. Clara kissed him back with everything she had, months of loneliness and fear and hope pouring out of her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. I love you too, he said. God help me. I love you too. And there in the entrance hall, surrounded by the ghosts of who they'd been and the promise of who they might become, Clara Whitmore chose her future. Not the one that had been chosen for her, but the one she'd found when she stopped being invisible and started being seen. The kiss had changed everything and nothing at all. Clara woke the next morning in her blue silk room with sunlight streaming through the windows and the taste of Rowan still on her lips. She pressed her fingers to her mouth, half convinced she'd imagined the entire night. But no, it had happened. He'd chosen her, defended her, kissed her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. And then he'd walked her to her door, kissed her once more, softer this time, almost reverent, and said goodnight. Now, in the cold light of morning, reality was settling back in. She dressed quickly, her hands fumbling with the buttons. The maid who came to help her was different from usual, a girl Clara hadn't seen before, with anxious eyes and trembling fingers. "Where's Mary?" Clara asked. "Ill, miss. Mrs. Blackwood sent me instead." The girl, she couldn't have been more than 16, kept her gaze fixed on the floor. "I'm to tell you breakfast is served in the small dining room." "Thank you." The girl fled as soon as Clara dismissed her. Strange. Clara made her way downstairs, her stomach a tangle of nerves and anticipation. Would things be different now? Would Rowan look at her the same way he had last night? Or would daylight bring second thoughts? She found him already at the table, reading a letter. He looked up when she entered, and his face broke into a smile that made her heart stutter. "Good morning." "Good morning." Clara slid into her chair, suddenly shy. "Did you sleep well?" "Not particularly." His eyes held hers. "I kept thinking about last night." Heat climbed Clara's neck. "Oh. I have no regrets, if that's what you're worried about." Rowan set down the letter. "Though I should probably apologize for the intensity. I'm not usually so—" "Don't." Clara reached across the table and caught his hand. "Don't apologize, please." His fingers tightened around hers. "All right, but we should talk about what happens next." "Next?" "The wedding. We should move it up." Clara blinked. "Move it up? From when?" It was tentatively set for spring, 3 months away. Rowan's jaw was set. "I want to marry you sooner, much sooner." "Why?" "Because your mother is going to make trouble, and I want you legally protected before she does." He picked up the letter he'd been reading. This arrived an hour ago. From London. "Apparently Lady Whitmore has been spreading rumors that I'm being swindled, that you misrepresented yourself, that the engagement was obtained through deception." Clara's stomach dropped. "What kind of rumors?" "The ugly kind. That you're unstable, that you forged documents, that you seduced me under false pretenses." His face was grim. "It's nonsense, obviously. But society loves scandal, and your mother is well connected enough to make this story spread. She's trying to force you to break the engagement." "Yes. And if I do, you'll be ruined. Unmarriageable. She'll have accomplished nothing except destroying your reputation." Rowan stood and came around the table to her. "So we marry quickly, before she can do more damage." Clara looked up at him. "How quickly?" 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Clara's voice came out strangled. "That's not enough time to—" "It's plenty of time. We'll have a small ceremony here at Blackridge, just family and close friends. No grand spectacle, no society nonsense, just us." He knelt beside her chair. "Unless you want to wait? If you need more time—" "No." The word surprised her, but it was true. "No, I don't want to wait. I want to marry you. I'm worried about the gossip, what people will say." "Let them talk. They'll find new scandals soon enough. They always do." Clara wanted to believe him, but she'd spent her whole life being invisible, and the thought of suddenly being the subject of gossip, of judgment, made her skin crawl. "Hey!" Rowan tilted her chin up. "Look at me. We're going to be fine, better than fine." "You don't know that." I know you, that's enough. Before Clara could respond, Mrs. Blackwood appeared in the doorway, her face drawn. Your Grace, Lord Pemberton is here. He says it's urgent. Rowan's expression darkened. Pemberton. Of course. He stood, brushing off his knees. Show him to my study. Clara, this may take a while. I'll come with you. You don't have to. I want to. Clara rose, squaring her shoulders. Whatever this is, we handle it together. That's what you said. Rowan studied her for a moment, then nodded. Together. They found Lord Pemberton pacing Rowan's study like a caged animal. He was a broad man in his 50s with thinning hair and the florid complexion of someone who enjoyed wine more than exercise. He'd been a friend of Rowan's father, Clara knew, and acted as an informal advisor. Rowan, thank heaven! Pemberton stopped pacing. I came as soon as I heard. This situation is worse than I thought. What situation? Rowan gestured for Clara to sit, but she remained standing beside him. The rumors about Miss Whitmore. They're not just gossip anymore. Lady Whitmore has filed a formal complaint with the Lord Chancellor's office. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. A complaint? She's claiming fraud. Says you misrepresented yourself to secure the engagement, that Rowan was deceived, that the contract is invalid. Pemberton's eyes darted to Clara, then away. She's demanding an investigation. That's absurd, Rowan said flatly. There was no deception. I knew exactly who I was engaging myself to. Did you? Pemberton pulled out a handkerchief and mopped his brow. Because Lady Whitmore has affidavits from 3 servants at Whitmore House, stating that you specifically requested Vivian, that you never met Clara before she arrived here, that the substitution was deliberate and concealed. The substitution wasn't concealed. I was informed. Were you informed before or after the contracts were signed? Rowan went very still. After. Then she has a case. Pemberton sank into a chair. Legally, the engagement may be voidable, and if it's declared void, Miss Whitmore will be ruined. No man of standing will touch her. She'll be known as the woman who tried to trap a duke. Clara's legs suddenly wouldn't hold her. She gripped the back of a chair, her vision swimming. That's not going to happen, Rowan said. His voice was deadly calm. I won't let it. You may not have a choice. If the Chancellor's office investigates and finds merit in Lady Whitmore's complaint, then I'll testify. I'll tell them the engagement was my choice, made with full knowledge of the circumstances. Will you tell them about Eleanor? The question hung in the air like smoke. Rowan's face went white. What does Eleanor have to do with this? Lady Whitmore is claiming you're mentally unstable, still grieving your late wife, unable to make sound decisions. She has letters, correspondence between you and Lady Margrave discussing your difficulty moving forward. Pemberton's voice was almost gentle. Rowan, she's building a case that you weren't in your right mind when you agreed to marry Clara. That you were vulnerable and Clara took advantage. That's a lie. Clara's voice was shaking. I know that, Pemberton said quickly, but the court won't know that. They'll see a grieving widower, a second-choice bride, and a mother claiming fraud. It's a compelling narrative. Rowan's hands were clenched into fists. So what do you suggest? Release her from the engagement, now, before this goes any further. Pemberton looked miserable. I know that's not what you want to hear, but if you truly care about Miss Whitmore, you'll protect her the only way you can, by setting her free. No. Clara spoke before Rowan could. Absolutely not. Both men looked at her. Clara, Rowan began. No, I won't let her do this. I won't let her win. Clara's voice was steadier now, fueled by something that felt like rage. My mother sent me here like I was garbage. She spent my entire life treating me like I was worth less than nothing. And now that I've found something good, something real, she wants to take it away because it doesn't fit her plans. Miss Whitmore, I understand you're upset. I'm not upset, I'm furious. Clara turned to Rowan. You told me last night that you loved me. Did you mean it? You know I did. Then marry me. Tomorrow, if we can arrange it. Show the world that this isn't fraud or deception or whatever else she's claiming. Show them it's real. If we rush into marriage now, it will look like we're trying to avoid investigation, Pemberton protested. It will only make things worse. Then let it get worse. Clara's chin lifted. I'm done hiding. I'm done being invisible. If my mother wants a scandal, I'll give her one. But I'm not walking away from this. Rowan stared at her. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face, fierce and proud. Neither am I. He turned to Pemberton. Thank you for the warning, but we're moving forward. Clara and I will marry in 2 weeks as planned. Rowan, this is madness. Maybe, but it's my madness. Rowan crossed to his desk and pulled out paper. Draft a statement. Make it clear that I entered this engagement with full knowledge, that I'm of sound mind, and that any suggestion of fraud is baseless and slanderous. Pemberton sighed heavily. You're making this much harder than it needs to be. Good. I want it hard. I want Lady Whitmore to know exactly what she's up against. Rowan's eyes glinted. She tried to destroy her own daughter to save face. I'm going to make her regret that. After Pemberton left, still muttering about lawsuits and scandal, Clara and Rowan stood together in the study, the weight of what they were facing settling over them. Are you sure about this? Rowan asked quietly. Because it's going to get ugly. Your mother won't stop with one complaint. She'll drag your name through every drawing room in London. I know. Clara moved to the window, looking out at the gray November sky. But staying silent won't protect me. It never has. My whole life I've tried to be small and quiet and inoffensive, and it only made people think they could ignore me. Or worse, use me. You're not small or quiet now. No, I'm not. Clara turned to face him. And that terrifies me. But hiding terrifies me more. Rowan crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. Clara leaned into him, breathing in his scent, letting his solidity ground her. We're going to survive this, he murmured into her hair. Both of us. Promise? Promise. They stood there for a long moment. Then Clara felt Rowan tense. What? She asked. I just realized something. He pulled back to look at her. We need to go to London. What? Why? Because your mother is controlling the narrative. She's spreading lies and no one is hearing our side. If we want to fight back, we need to be visible. We need to let society see us together, see that this is real. Clara's stomach twisted. London, during the season? The winter gatherings are starting, small parties mostly, but influential people. If we attend together, if we present a united front, Rowan's jaw was set. We can turn this around. Or we could make it worse. Possibly, but I'm tired of hiding in the country while your mother poisons the well. He cupped her face in his hands. I want people to see what I see. A woman worth fighting for. Clara wanted to believe him, but the thought of walking into a London ballroom with every eye on her, every whisper dissecting her inadequacies, made her want to vomit. I don't know how to do that, she said quietly. I don't know how to be visible. You've been doing it for weeks. With me. That's different. You're just one person. So start with one person at a time. Look them in the eye. Speak when spoken to. Be yourself. Rowan's thumbs stroked her cheekbones. That's all you have to do. Be the woman I fell in love with. And if that's not enough, then they're fools. And we'll know who our real friends are. It should have sounded idealistic, naive, but Rowan's eyes were steady, certain. He really believed they could win this. Clara took a deep breath. All right, we'll go to London. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Rowan kissed her then, gentle and reassuring, and Clara tried to convince herself that courage and stupidity weren't the same thing. They left for London 3 days later. The journey was long and cold, but Clara barely noticed. She spent most of the time rehearsing conversations in her head, imagining every possible social disaster, working herself into a state of near panic that Rowan had to talk her down from twice. Stop catastrophizing, he said on the second day, reaching across the carriage to take her hand. You're going to be fine. You don't know that. I do, because I've watched you debate philosophy, reorganize my library, and stare down your mother without flinching. You have more spine than half the peers in Parliament. Spine doesn't matter in a ballroom. Spine is the only thing that matters in a ballroom. They arrived at Rowan's London townhouse after dark. It was smaller than Blackridge Hall, but no less impressive, a 4-story stone building in a fashionable district. The staff had been warned of their arrival, and a fire was already roaring in the drawing room when they entered. Mrs. Blackwood had traveled ahead to oversee preparations, and she met them in the entrance hall with the same stern expression she always wore. "Your chambers are ready, Your Grace." "Miss Whitmore, you're in the Rose Room. I've laid out appropriate dresses for tomorrow's calls." Tomorrow? Clara felt her stomach drop. "We're making calls tomorrow?" "Lady Ashford is expecting you at 2 o'clock, Mrs. Blackwood said. "She's one of the most influential hostesses in London. If you want to make a good impression, you start with her." Clara looked at Rowan in alarm. He squeezed her hand. "We'll manage," he said. But that night, alone in the unfamiliar Rose Room, Clara couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about her mother's accusations, about walking into rooms where everyone had already decided she was a fraud, about Vivian's parting words. "You're not enough for him. You never will be." What if she was right? Clara got up and paced, her bare feet cold on the floor. Through the window she could see London spread out below, a sea of lights and lives, all of them more interesting than hers. A soft knock on the door made her jump. "Clara?" Rowan's voice muffled. "Are you awake?" She opened the door. He stood there in a dressing gown, hair disheveled, looking as restless as she felt. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "I kept thinking you might be worried." "I am worried. Can I come in?" Clara nodded and stepped back. Rowan entered, closing the door behind him. It was wildly improper. A man in her bedroom at night, but Clara found she didn't care. "Talk to me," Rowan said. "What's going through your head?" "Everything. Nothing. I keep thinking about tomorrow, about facing all those people who already think I'm some kind of scheming opportunist. They don't think that. You don't know what they think. Neither do you." Rowan caught her hands. "Clara, listen to me. Most of these people don't have opinions yet. They're waiting to see what happens. And the ones who've already decided, they're not worth worrying about." "Easy for you to say. You're a duke. People have to respect you. They have to be polite to me. That's not the same thing." He pulled her over to the bed and sat, tugging her down beside him. "When Eleanor died, half of society assumed I'd lose my mind. They watched me like I was a spectacle, waiting for me to break down publicly. Every social engagement felt like a performance." "How did you survive it?" "I stopped caring what they thought. I showed up, I did what was required, and then I left. I didn't try to manage their opinions or win their approval. I just existed." He looked at her. "You can do the same. I'm not as strong as you. You're stronger. You just don't know it yet." Clara wanted to believe him. She leaned against his shoulder, exhausted. "Stay," she said quietly. "Just for a little while. I don't want to be alone." Rowan hesitated. Then he shifted, stretching out on top of the covers and pulling her against his chest. Clara curled into him, her head over his heart, listening to its steady rhythm. "Better?" he murmured. "Better." They lay there in the darkness, neither sleeping, just holding on. "Rowan?" Clara said eventually. "Thank you for fighting for me." His arms tightened around her. "Always." Lady Ashford's townhouse was everything Clara had feared, opulent, crowded, and full of people who stared at her like she was a curiosity in a museum. She and Rowan were announced at the entrance to the drawing room. Conversation didn't stop exactly, but it shifted, became quieter, more speculative. Clara felt the weight of every gaze as they moved through the room. Lady Ashford herself was a formidable woman in her 60s, dressed in burgundy silk with enough jewelry to fund a small army. She looked Clara up and down with the practiced assessment of someone who'd spent decades sorting people into categories. "Your Grace," she said to Rowan, "how unexpected to see you in London this time of year." "Lady Ashford," Rowan bowed. "May I present my betrothed, Miss Clara Whitmore." Clara curtsied, her knees shaking. "A pleasure, Lady Ashford." "Is it?" Lady Ashford's eyebrow arched. "I confess, I'm curious. I was under the impression the Duke was courting your sister." Here it was, the first test. Clara lifted her chin. "You were correctly informed. My sister declined the match. I accepted it." "How fortunate for you." The words were barbed, but Clara met Lady Ashford's gaze without flinching. I consider myself very fortunate, yes. A pause. Then Lady Ashford's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Well, at least you're honest about it. She gestured to a nearby sofa. Sit. Tell me about yourself, Miss Whitmore. I want to know what sort of woman captures a duke's attention when her prettier sister could not. Clara sat, acutely aware of every eye in the room still trained on her. Rowan settled beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. I'm not sure I captured anything, Clara said carefully. We found we enjoyed each other's company. It grew from there. Enjoyed each other's company, Lady Ashford repeated. How refreshingly mundane. Most young women would speak of great passion or destiny. I'm not most young women. Clearly, Lady Ashford sipped her tea. Tell me, Miss Whitmore, what do you think of Kant's categorical imperative? Clara blinked. I'm sorry? Kant, the philosopher, his work on moral philosophy. Surely you have an opinion. It was another test. Clara could feel it. She took a breath. I think the categorical imperative is philosophically interesting, but practically limited, she said. The idea that we should act only according to maxims we'd want universalized makes logical sense, but it doesn't account for context or nuance. Sometimes the right action depends on specific circumstances. Lady Ashford's eyebrows rose. Go on. Take lying, for example. Kant would say lying is always wrong because we couldn't universalize dishonesty. But what if you're lying to protect someone from harm? What if telling the truth would result in greater suffering? Clara was warming to the subject now, forgetting her nerves. I think any moral system that doesn't allow for human complexity is incomplete. You disagree with Kant, then? In part. I think his framework has value, but it's not sufficient on its own. Silence. Then Lady Ashford laughed, a genuine, delighted sound. Well, Your Grace, I see why you chose this one. She has a brain. Lady Ashford set down her teacup. Miss Whitmore, you're either brilliantly genuine or a very skilled actress. I haven't decided which. I'm just myself, Lady Ashford. Yes, I'm beginning to see that. Lady Ashford stood. You'll come to my winter ball next week, both of you, and I expect you to attend my literary salon the week after. We're discussing Rousseau, and I want to hear your thoughts. It was a command, not an invitation. Clara glanced at Rowan, who looked faintly amused. We'd be honored, he said. Of course you would. Lady Ashford swept away, leaving them alone on the sofa. Clara sagged against the cushions. Did that just happen? That just happened. Rowan's eyes were bright with something like pride. You impressed her. I don't understand how you were yourself. Intelligent, thoughtful, unafraid to disagree. That's rare in this world. People respect it. He took her hand. I told you you'd be fine. But as they left Lady Ashford's townhouse an hour later, Clara saw a familiar carriage waiting across the street. The Whitmore crest on the door was unmistakable. Her mother was watching. The next week was a blur of social calls, carefully orchestrated appearances, and whispered conversations. News of Lady Ashford's approval spread quickly, and suddenly Clara found herself in demand. Invitations arrived by the dozen. Hostesses who'd ignored her at Lady Ashford's were now eager to meet the clever Miss Whitmore. But the gossip hadn't stopped. If anything, it had intensified. Clara overheard fragments everywhere, in withdrawing rooms, behind fans, in the careful pauses between pleasantries. Heard she trapped him. The mother filed complaints. Still mourning his first wife, obviously not thinking clearly, Rowan acted as if he heard none of it. He stayed beside Clara at every event, his presence a silent declaration. But Clara could see the strain in his face, the tightness around his eyes that appeared whenever someone mentioned Eleanor. The breaking point came at Lord Hastings' card party. They'd been there less than an hour when Vivian walked in. Clara felt the room's attention shift like a physical thing. Her sister was dressed in cream silk that made her look ethereal, her golden hair arranged in artful curls. She moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her welcome. When she saw Clara, she smiled. Sister, how lovely to see you. Clara's throat went dry. Vivian. And your grace. Vivian turned that dazzling smile on Rowan. I was hoping we might speak privately. I don't think that's appropriate, Rowan said evenly. Please. It's important. Vivian's eyes were wide, pleading. Just a moment. Surely you can spare that much. The room was watching, waiting. Rowan looked at Clara. She nodded, even though her stomach was churning. Go. It's fine. They moved to a corner of the room, still visible, but out of earshot. Clara watched Vivian lean close to Rowan, her hand touching his arm, her face earnest and beautiful. She's very good at this, a voice said beside her. Clara turned to find Lady Margrave standing there, dressed in black, her gray eyes cold. Good at what? Clara asked. Manipulating men. My daughter tried to warn Rowan about women like your sister, women who see people as tools rather than humans. Catherine took a glass of wine from a passing footman. But men never listen until it's too late. Rowan isn't being manipulated. Isn't he? Look at him. Clara looked. Rowan's face was set, unreadable, as Vivian spoke. Whatever she was saying, it was lengthy and apparently impassioned. Your sister is offering him an escape, Catherine continued. A chance to choose the woman he originally wanted instead of the substitute. Most men would take that offer. Rowan isn't most men. Every man is most men when given the right incentive. Catherine's smile was thin. You should prepare yourself, Miss Whitmore. The house always wins. Then she glided away, leaving Clara standing alone with her fears crystallizing into certainty. What if Catherine was right? What if Rowan looked at Vivian, perfect, beautiful Vivian, and realized he'd been settling? What if this whole thing had been a mistake, and he was just now seeing it clearly? Clara forced herself to breathe. She would not fall apart in public. She would not... Rowan returned. His face was grim, his jaw tight. He took Clara's hand and said, We're leaving. What? Why? We're leaving, now. He pulled her through the crowd, ignoring the surprised looks and whispered speculation. They didn't speak until they were in the carriage. The door closed, the night pressing in around them. What did she say? Clara asked. Rowan was silent for a long moment. Then, she offered to marry me. Clara felt ice flood her veins. What? She said she'd made a terrible mistake, that she regretted refusing me, that if I ended the engagement with you and married her instead, she'd make sure your reputation stayed intact. She'd tell everyone it was a mutual decision, that we'd all agreed it was for the best. And? Clara could barely force the word out. Rowan turned to look at her. His eyes were blazing. And I told her to go to hell. You... What? I told her I wouldn't marry her if she was the last woman in England, that I'd rather be alone forever than spend one day with someone so shallow she thinks people are interchangeable. His hand tightened on hers. Then I told her if she ever approaches me again, I'll make sure everyone in London knows exactly what kind of person she is. Clara stared at him. You really said that? Word for word. Rowan pulled her into his arms. Clara, listen to me. I don't want Vivian. I don't want anyone but you. Whatever doubts you're having, whatever poison people are whispering, shut it out. You're the only choice I want to make. Clara buried her face in his chest, her whole body shaking. Everyone keeps saying I'm not enough. Then everyone is blind. They held each other as the carriage rolled through London streets, past houses blazing with light and parties they'd never attend, toward a future that was still uncertain, but at least, finally, theirs to choose. When they got home, a letter was waiting. Rowan opened it, read it, and his face went white. What? Clara asked. What is it? He handed her the letter without a word. It was from the Lord Chancellor's office. Formal, cold, devastating. An official investigation had been opened into the validity of their engagement. Both Clara and Rowan were required to testify. If fraud was proven, the engagement would be dissolved, and Clara would face charges of deception. The hearing was set for 1 week from today. Clara read it twice, her hands numb. They can't do this, she whispered. They can. They are. Rowan crumpled the letter in his fist. Your mother escalated. She must have called in favors, made promises. The Chancellor doesn't open investigations lightly. So what do we do? Rowan looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw fear in his eyes. I don't know. The silence in the drawing room felt suffocating. Clara stood frozen, the crumpled letter still clutched in Rowan's hand between them. The words burned in her mind. Investigation, testimony, charges of deception. 1 week. They had 1 week before everything unraveled. There has to be something we can do, Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt. Some way to fight this. We can hire solicitors, build a defense. Rowan ran a hand through his hair, making it stand on end. But Clara, if they're determined to find wrongdoing, they will. Your mother has influence, connections. She's probably already seeded the investigation with her version of events. Then we need our own version, our own evidence. Clara's mind was racing now, turning over possibilities. The servants at Blackridge, they've seen us together. They can testify that this is real, that we chose each other. Servant testimony won't carry much weight against a peer's complaint. What about letters? The correspondence between you and my family? The letters prove I requested Vivian originally. That's the problem. Rowan sank into a chair, defeat written across his face. Every piece of evidence they'll examine shows I asked for one sister and received another. The fact that I'm happy with the substitution doesn't matter legally. The contracts were signed under disputed circumstances. Clara felt panic clawing at her throat, but she forced it down. Panic wouldn't help, thinking would. What if we got married before the hearing? Rowan looked up sharply. What? If we're already married, they can't dissolve the engagement. It's done, legally binding. They could still charge you with fraud, could annul the marriage if they rule it was obtained through deception. But it would be harder, wouldn't it? Clara crossed to him, kneeling beside his chair. An annulment requires proof that the marriage was invalid from the start. If we stand together, if we both testify that we entered into it freely and honestly, it's risky. If the Chancellor's office sees it as us trying to circumvent their investigation, they could make the punishment worse. Worse than what? Public humiliation? Being labeled a fraud? Never being able to marry or have any kind of life worth living? Claire grabbed his hands. Rowan, I'm going to be destroyed no matter what. At least this way I'll be destroyed as your wife. He stared at her, something shifting in his expression. You really want to tie yourself to me that permanently, even knowing what it might cost? I already decided that when I told you I loved you. Clara squeezed his hands. I'm not running. Not anymore. Rowan pulled her up and into his lap, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Tomorrow then. We'll find someone to marry us tomorrow. That's not enough time. It has to be. Every day we wait is a day your mother can cause more damage. He pulled back to look at her. No ceremony, no guests. Just us and whoever can make it legal. Clara nodded against his chest, her heart hammering. Just us. But when Rowan made inquiries the next morning, they hit an immediate wall. Every clergy member he contacted required bans to be read for 3 consecutive Sundays, or a special license that took time to procure, time they didn't have. There must be someone, Clara said, pacing the study while Rowan sat at his desk surrounded by rejected correspondence. Someone who can marry us immediately. Not in London. Not legally. Rowan looked exhausted. We could go to Scotland. Marriage laws are different there. No waiting period, no license needed, but it's 3 days travel, minimum. We'd miss the hearing, which might actually help us, Clara said slowly. If we're not present, they can't compel testimony. They'd have to postpone. Or rule against us in absentia. Rowan rubbed his eyes. We're trapped. No good options. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Blackwood entered, her face carefully neutral. Your Grace, there's a gentleman here to see you, Lord Thornbury. He says it's urgent. Rowan and Clara exchanged glances. Thornbury was an old friend of Rowan's father, semi-retired from political life, but still influential. Show him in, Rowan said. Lord Thornbury was a lean man in his 70s with sharp eyes and silver hair. He walked with a cane but moved with the energy of someone much younger. When he saw Clara, he stopped. So this is the famous Miss Whitmore, the woman who set London on its ear. Clara stood, unsure whether she should curtsy or defend herself. Thornbury waved her back down. Sit, sit. I'm not here to judge you, girl. I'm here because I heard about this damned investigation and wanted to see if the rumors were true. He looked at Rowan. Are you actually planning to marry this woman? Or is your mother-in-law right that you've lost your senses? Former mother-in-law, Rowan corrected coldly, and yes, I'm marrying Clara, if I can find a way to do it legally in the next week. Why the rush? Because if we wait, the hearing will destroy any chance we have. Thornberry lowered himself into a chair, studying them both. Tell me everything, from the beginning. They did. Clara had expected to feel embarrassed, laying out the whole sordid story. The substitution, her mother's machinations, Vivian's rejection, and subsequent attempt to reclaim what she'd refused. But Thornberry listened without judgment, occasionally asking sharp questions that suggested a legal mind still very much intact. When they finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Your mother is a piece of work, he said finally, looking at Clara. Reminds me of my late sister. Same kind of ruthless social climbing, same willingness to sacrifice her children for advancement. He tapped his cane against the floor. But she's made a mistake. What mistake? Clara asked. She's fighting a battle she can't win. Oh, she can make noise, file complaints, spread gossip, but at the end of the day, Rowan is a duke. He has autonomy over his own marriage. The Lord Chancellor's office doesn't want to be seen as interfering with peer privilege. They're only investigating because your mother made enough fuss that they had to appear to take it seriously. So the investigation is just for show? Rowan leaned forward. Partially. They'll go through the motions, hear testimony, review documents. But unless they find clear evidence of criminal fraud, forged signatures, bribery, that sort of thing, they're not going to rule against a duke's stated wishes. Thornberry's eyes glinted. The trick is making sure Rowan's wishes are absolutely, unambiguously clear. I've already stated. You've stated your intentions. That's not the same thing. Thornberry stood, pacing slowly. What you need is a grand gesture, something so public, so unequivocal, that no one can question your commitment. Make the Chancellor's office look foolish for even investigating. Clara felt something stir in her chest. What kind of gesture? Thornberry smiled. The winter gathering at Ashford House, 3 days from now. It's the social event of the season. Every important family in England will be there. If you two attend together and make a very public declaration of your engagement, they're already expecting us to attend, Rowan said. That's not news. No, but what if you did more than attend? Thornberry's smile widened. What if you announced your wedding date, made it formal, official, in front of witnesses who actually matter? Clara's heart started racing. You mean turn the gathering into an engagement party? Exactly. Force the issue into the open. Your mother has been controlling the narrative by keeping things quiet and unofficial. Make it loud and official. Let society see you together. See that you're committed. See that this isn't some scheme but an actual relationship. That could backfire, Rowan said slowly, if we announce the wedding and the investigation finds against us. The investigation won't find against you, not if you give them no choice. Thornberry pointed his cane at Rowan. You're a duke. Your word carries weight. If you stand in front of the assembled peers of England and declare your intention to marry Clara Whitmore, if you make it personal and public and impossible to dismiss, the Chancellor's office will drop this investigation faster than a hot coal. They don't want to embarrass the peerage by implying a duke can't choose his own wife. Clara looked at Rowan. She could see the wheels turning in his mind, weighing risks and benefits. It's risky, Rowan said, but it might work. It will work. Trust me. Thornberry headed for the door, then paused. One more thing. When you make your announcement, be specific. Don't just say you're getting married eventually. Give a date. Soon. Make them understand this is happening with or without their approval. After Thornberry left, Clara and Rowan sat in stunned silence. Do you think he's right? Clara asked finally. I think he's the smartest political mind I know. If he says this will work, it probably will. Rowan pulled Clara into his arms. But it means walking into a room full of people who've been gossiping about us for weeks, announcing our wedding in front of your mother, your sister, everyone who thinks you're a fraud. I know. Can you do that? Clara thought about the girl who'd arrived at Blackridge Hall 2 months ago, terrified, invisible, certain she was worthless. That girl would have said no, would have run rather than face public scrutiny. But that girl didn't exist anymore. Yes, Clara said. I can do it. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Rowan hired the best solicitors in London to prepare their defense for the hearing, just in case Thornbury's plan failed. Clara worked with Mrs. Blackwood to commission a dress appropriate for a formal announcement. Nothing too extravagant, but nice enough to signal confidence. Lady Ashford sent a note confirming their attendance and expressing her delight that they'd be joining the winter gathering. Clara suspected Thornbury had already told her what they were planning. The old woman missed nothing. The morning of the gathering, Clara woke early and couldn't get back to sleep. She stood at her window watching London wake up, servants lighting fires, vendors setting up carts, the city coming to life with all its noise and chaos and judgment. A knock at her door made her turn. Come in, Rowan entered, already dressed for the day. He looked tired, but determined. Ready? He asked. No, but I'm doing it anyway. He crossed to her and took her hands. Once we do this, there's no going back. Everyone will know. Your mother, Vivian, all of society. They'll all see us claim each other publicly. Good, Clara lifted her chin. I want them to see. I want my mother to watch me choose you in front of everyone she's tried to impress. I want Vivian to see that being second choice was actually being first. Rowan smiled, fierce and proud. There's the woman I fell in love with. They arrived at Ashford House at 8 o'clock, just as the gathering was reaching its peak. The mansion blazed with light, music pouring from the open windows. Carriages lined the street, disgorging elegantly dressed guests who disappeared into the glittering chaos inside. Clara's hands were shaking as Rowan helped her down. She'd worn deep blue, Eleanor's color, she realized with a start, but it was too late to change. Her hair was arranged simply, her only jewelry a necklace Rowan had given her that morning, sapphires that had belonged to his mother. You look beautiful, he said quietly. I look terrified. You look brave. There's a difference. They walked up the stairs together, past guests who stopped and stared, past whispers that followed them like smoke. At the door, the butler announced them. His Grace the Duke of Blackridge and Miss Clara Whitmore. The ballroom fell silent. Clara forced herself to keep walking, to keep her head high as hundreds of eyes tracked their progress. She saw faces she recognized, Lady Margrave near the windows, looking furious. Lord Pemberton by the refreshment table, looking anxious. And there, near the orchestra, her mother and Vivian. Lady Whitmore's face was a mask of cold rage. Vivian looked pale, her perfect composure finally cracking. Lady Ashford materialized beside them like a ship cutting through fog. Your Grace, Miss Whitmore, how delightful you could join us. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. I believe you had an announcement you wished to make? Clara's heart hammered. This was it, no turning back. Rowan squeezed her hand once, then stepped forward. Lady Ashford, if I might impose on your hospitality. Of course. Lady Ashford gestured to the orchestra. The music stopped. The room's attention focused completely on Rowan. He stood there for a moment, looking impossibly composed, and Clara realized this was what nobility meant. Not titles or money, but the ability to command a room simply by existing in it. Ladies and gentlemen, Rowan began, his voice carrying easily across the sudden silence. Thank you for allowing me to interrupt your evening. I have an announcement that I wish to make in the presence of witnesses who matter. Clara saw her mother move forward, as if to object. Lord Thornbury, standing near the door, shook his head minutely. Lady Whitmore froze. As many of you know, Rowan continued, I recently became engaged to Miss Clara Whitmore. There has been some discussion about the circumstances of that engagement. Some have questioned whether it was appropriate, whether it was valid, whether I knew what I was doing. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara wanted to sink through the floor, but Rowan's voice strengthened. So let me make myself absolutely clear in front of all of you, so there can be no misunderstanding. I am marrying Clara Whitmore. Not out of obligation, not out of confusion, not because I was tricked or deceived, but because she is the finest woman I have ever known. Clara's breath caught. She is intelligent where others are merely educated. She is honest where others are merely polite. She challenges me, surprises me, makes me think and feel and hope in ways I'd forgotten I was capable of. Rowan turned to look at Clara, and the intensity in his eyes made her dizzy. I did not choose her by accident. I chose her because she is worth choosing. The room was utterly silent. So to those who doubt my intentions or her worth, I say this. Clara Whitmore and I will be married 4 weeks from today, here in London, in a ceremony open to anyone who wishes to attend. You are all invited to witness it, to celebrate it, or to simply accept that it is happening regardless of your opinion. He crossed to Clara and took her hand, pulling her forward to stand beside him. Clara, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, will you marry me? In front of all these witnesses, will you be my wife, my duchess, my partner in all things? It wasn't the proposal she'd imagined as a girl. There were no roses, no privacy, no romantic setting, just a crowded ballroom full of judgment and a man asking her to choose him as publicly as possible. Clara met his eyes and saw everything there. Love, determination, a future that was terrifying and perfect all at once. Yes, she said clearly, I'll marry you. The room exploded. Some people applauded, others whispered furiously. A few looked scandalized. But the noise was overwhelming, undeniable, the sound of society acknowledging what it could no longer ignore. Lady Ashford was beaming. Well, that was decisive. She raised her voice. Music! Dancing! We're celebrating an engagement! The orchestra struck up a waltz. Rowan pulled Clara onto the dance floor before she could protest. They moved together through the steps she'd learned years ago and barely remembered, but Rowan's lead was steady, confident. You did it, he murmured. You were perfect. I just said yes. You did all the talking. You stood there while I talked. That took more courage than you know. They spun through the crowd, and Clara caught glimpses of reactions. Lord Thornbury nodding in approval, Lady Margrave looking grudgingly impressed, strangers watching with newfound interest. And there, at the edge of the dance floor, her mother and Vivienne. Lady Whitmore looked like she'd been struck. Vivienne's perfect face was twisted with something Clara had never seen there before. Defeat. As they danced past, Clara met her sister's eyes, and for the first time in her life, she didn't look away. Vivienne flinched. The dance ended. Immediately, people swarmed them, some offering congratulations, others asking intrusive questions, a few clearly just wanting to be part of the spectacle. Rowan fielded them all with practiced ease while Clara smiled until her face hurt. Lord Thornbury appeared at her elbow during a brief lull. Brilliant, he said quietly. Absolutely brilliant. The Chancellor's office will drop the investigation within 48 hours. I guarantee it. How can you be sure? Because you just made it politically impossible for them to proceed. Every person in this room will talk about tonight. By tomorrow, all of London will know the Duke of Blackridge publicly declared his love for you. The Chancellor can't rule against that without looking like he's interfering in peer business. He'll quietly shelve the investigation and pretend it never happened. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. It's really over? The investigation? Yes. The gossip? Thornbury smiled. That will take longer, but you've won the battle that mattered. After another hour of socializing, Clara needed air. She slipped out onto one of the balconies overlooking the garden, breathing in the cold November night. She'd been there only a moment when she heard footsteps behind her. Clara! She turned. Vivienne stood in the doorway, backlit by the ballroom's glow. What do you want? Clara asked, too tired for politeness. Vivienne stepped onto the balcony, pulling the door closed behind her. In the dim light, she looked less perfect. Her eyes were red, her composure fragile. I wanted to tell you that you've made a terrible mistake, Vivienne said, but her voice lacked conviction. Have I? He doesn't really love you. He loves what you represent, a fresh start, a chance to move past Eleanor. Once the novelty wears off... Stop! Claire's voice was quiet but firm. You don't know what he feels. You barely spoke to him before you rejected him. I know men. They always want what's difficult to obtain. The moment you're secured, the moment you're his wife, he'll lose interest. Clara studied her sister, this woman who'd been perfect and untouchable and enviable her entire life. And suddenly Clara saw her clearly. You're not trying to convince me, Clara said slowly. You're trying to convince yourself. Vivienne flinched. What? You refused him because you thought you could do better, that there would be other dukes, richer men, more exciting prospects. But there weren't. And now you're watching me marry the man you threw away, and you can't stand it. That's not... It is. Clara stepped closer. For the first time in our lives, I have something you want, and you can't take it from me. That's what this is really about. Vivian's face crumpled. For a moment she looked younger, vulnerable in a way Clara had never seen. He was supposed to be mine, Vivian whispered. Mother promised me I could choose, that I didn't have to marry anyone I didn't want. But then when I actually said no, she sent me instead. And now you're standing in my place, wearing his ring, accepting his love, and everyone in there thinks you're brave and clever and worthy. Vivian's voice broke. While I'm just the fool who rejected a duke. Clara felt something unexpected, not triumph, but pity, because she understood now. Vivian had been trapped too, just differently. Trapped by beauty, by expectations, by the assumption that perfection meant happiness. You could have had him, Clara said quietly, if you'd wanted him. But you didn't. You wanted the idea of him, the status, the title. You didn't want the actual man. And you do? I love him. The real him, not the fantasy. Clara turned to look at the garden. I'm sorry Mother used both of us. I'm sorry you feel like you lost something. But I'm not sorry I found him. Silence stretched between them. Then Vivian laughed, a broken, bitter sound. You know what the worst part is? You actually deserve him. You always were smarter than me. I just didn't want to admit it. She turned and walked back into the ballroom, leaving Clara alone with the night and the distant sound of music and the knowledge that something fundamental had shifted. She'd faced her sister and survived. When Clara returned to the ballroom, Rowan was waiting. He took one look at her face and pulled her close. Are you all right? Better than all right. Clara leaned into him. I think I just won. You did. Completely. He kissed her forehead. Can we leave now? I'm exhausted from being charming. Clara laughed. Yes. Let's go home. They made their excuses to Lady Ashford, who winked and told them to get some rest before the real work began. The carriage ride back to the townhouse was quiet, both of them drained but content. Inside, Mrs. Blackwood met them with a letter. This arrived an hour ago, Your Grace, from the Lord Chancellor's office. Rowan opened it, read it, and started laughing. What? Clara demanded. He handed her the letter. It was brief, formal, and exactly what Thornberry had predicted. The investigation was being closed due to lack of evidence supporting the complaint. No hearing would be necessary. The engagement was considered valid. Clara read it twice, hardly daring to believe it. It's over, she whispered. It's over. Rowan pulled her into his arms, spinning her around. You're free. We're free. Clara held on to him, tears streaming down her face, tears of relief, of joy, of exhausted triumph. They'd done it. Against her mother, against society, against every expectation and obstacle, they'd won. That night, lying in bed unable to sleep despite her exhaustion, Clara thought about the girl who'd left Whitmore House in a borrowed dress and borrowed hope. That girl had been invisible, unwanted, certain of her own inadequacy. She was gone now. In her place was someone new, someone who'd learned to be seen, to fight, to choose her own future instead of accepting what was given. And that person was getting married in 4 weeks. Clara woke on her wedding day to rain. It drummed against the windows of the townhouse with the same relentless rhythm that had accompanied her arrival at Blackridge Hall 4 months ago. She lay still for a moment, listening to it, remembering the terrified girl who'd made that journey. That version of herself felt like a stranger now. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in. Mrs. Blackwood entered carrying a breakfast tray, her stern face softer than usual. Your Grace thought you might want to eat something before the chaos begins. Clara sat up, accepting the tray. Is he nervous? His Grace? Terrified. Mrs. Blackwood's mouth twitched. He's been up since dawn, driving the staff mad with questions about flowers and seating arrangements. You'd think we were hosting the coronation. It feels bigger than that. It is bigger. For both of you. Mrs. Blackwood moved to the wardrobe, pulling out the wedding dress they'd commissioned 3 weeks ago. Ivory silk with delicate embroidery, simple but elegant. This is the day you stop being what other people made you and become what you chose. Clara looked at the dress, her throat tight. What if I'm not ready? No one's ever ready. You just do it anyway. Mrs. Blackwood laid the dress across the bed with surprising gentleness. Eat! You'll need your strength. The morning passed in a blur of preparation. A maid came to arrange Clara's hair, pinning it up in soft curls that framed her face. Another helped her into the dress, lacing the back with careful precision. When Clara finally looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked like a bride. More than that, she looked like someone who belonged here, wearing this dress, marrying a duke. The transformation was startling. You're beautiful, miss, the maid whispered. Clara touched the mirror's surface, half expecting her reflection to reveal the truth, that she was still just Clara, the unwanted daughter, the substitute. But the woman in the mirror met her gaze steadily, without apology. Maybe she'd been Clara all along. Maybe she just needed to believe it. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock at St. James's Church. True to his word, Rowan had made it public. Invitations sent to everyone who mattered, and several who didn't. Clara had argued against the spectacle, but Rowan had been firm. Let them see, he'd said. Let them witness what choosing looks like. Now riding through London in a carriage decorated with white flowers, Clara understood. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a statement. A final, irrevocable declaration that they belonged to each other, regardless of what anyone thought. The streets were lined with people, not just invited guests, but ordinary Londoners who'd heard about the controversial marriage and wanted to see it for themselves. Some waved. Others stared. A few shouted congratulations that Clara couldn't quite hear over the rain and her own hammering heart. The church loomed ahead, gray stone against gray sky. Carriages crowded the approach, guests hurrying inside to escape the weather. Clara recognized faces, Lady Ashford, Lord Thornbury, various peers and politicians she'd met over the past month. And there, standing apart from the others, her mother and Vivian. Clara's breath caught. She hadn't expected them to come, hadn't sent an invitation, hadn't thought they'd dare show their faces after everything that had happened. Lady Whitmore looked older than Clara remembered, thinner, harder, her face set in lines of permanent disapproval. Vivian stood beside her, pale and subdued in gray silk. When their eyes met Clara's through the carriage window, neither of them smiled. The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door, offering his hand. Clara stepped out into the rain. She expected her mother to turn away, to ignore her as she always had. But Lady Whitmore moved forward instead, blocking Clara's path to the church. Clara, her voice was cold, clipped. We need to speak. There's nothing to say. Clara tried to step around her, but her mother caught her arm. There's everything to say. You've humiliated this family. I've humiliated you, Clara corrected. There's a difference. Lady Whitmore's grip tightened. You were meant to be quiet, grateful. Instead, you've made yourself notorious. Do you have any idea what people are saying? That I raised a schemer? That the Whitmores can't be trusted? Let go of me. Not until you understand what you've done. You've destroyed your sister's prospects, ruined our family's reputation. I said let go. Clara pulled her arm free with enough force to make her mother stumble. You don't get to do this anymore. You don't get to make me feel small or worthless or grateful for scraps. I'm done. You ungrateful? I was never ungrateful. I was just tired of being invisible. Clara's voice was steady despite the rain soaking into her dress, despite the audience gathering on the church steps. You sent me here because you thought I was expendable, that I'd disappear quietly and let you pretend this whole mess never happened. But I didn't disappear. I found someone who actually sees me, and you can't stand it. Lady Whitmore's face had gone white. You have no idea. I have every idea. I know exactly what you did. You tried to destroy me to save face, to protect Vivian's reputation at the expense of mine. And when that didn't work, when Rowan chose me anyway, you couldn't accept it. Clara stepped closer. But here's what you're going to do now. You're going to walk into that church. You're going to sit quietly. And you're going to watch me marry a man who loves me. Not because I trapped him or deceived him, but because I'm worth loving. Clara. Vivian's voice, small and uncertain. Clara turned to her sister. Vivian looked miserable, her perfect composure completely shattered. For a moment, Clara felt that old instinct to apologize, to smooth things over, to make herself smaller so Vivian could shine. But she didn't. "You could have been happy for me," Clara said quietly, "if you'd wanted to. But you can't stand the idea that I got something you didn't choose, so you helped Mother try to take it away." "That's not true," Vivian whispered. I never wanted." "Yes, you did. You just didn't want to admit it." Clara softened slightly. "I'm not angry anymore, Vivian. I just feel sorry for you. Because you've spent your whole life being perfect for other people, and you still don't know who you are underneath all that polish." Vivian flinched like she'd been slapped. Clara turned back to her mother. "I'm getting married now. You can attend or leave. Your choice." She walked past them both, up the church steps, and through the heavy wooden doors without looking back. Inside, the church was packed. Every pew was filled with faces she recognized and dozens she didn't. The air smelled like flowers and rain and expectation. At the far end of the aisle, standing beside the altar, Rowan waited. When he saw her, his whole face transformed. The nervousness that had been etched in his features melted away, replaced by something that looked like wonder. Clara started walking. Each step felt monumental. She passed Lady Ashford, who winked, Lord Thornbury, who nodded approval, Lady Margrave, who looked grudgingly pleased, strangers whose names she'd never learned but whose gossip she'd endured for weeks. Behind her, she heard the church doors open again. Footsteps. 2 sets. Her mother and Vivienne slipping into a back pew. They'd stayed. Clara reached the altar. Rowan took her hands, his grip warm and steady. "You're soaked," he murmured. "It's raining." "I noticed." His smile was soft. "You look beautiful anyway." The ceremony began. Clara barely heard the words. She was too focused on Rowan's face, on the way he was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. When it came time for vows, his voice was clear and unwavering. "I, Rowan Hale, take you, Clara Whitmore, to be my wife, to love and to cherish, to honor and protect from this day forward, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, until death parts us." Simple words, traditional words, but the way he said them, with absolute certainty, absolute commitment, made them revolutionary. Clara's turn. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. "I, Clara Whitmore, take you, Rowan Hale, to be my husband, to love and to cherish, to honor and support from this day forward, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, until death parts us." The priest pronounced them married. Rowan kissed her, gentle and reverent and full of promise. The church erupted in applause. They walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife. Clara caught glimpses of reactions as they passed, joy, approval, a few lingering doubts. But it didn't matter anymore. The only opinion that mattered was walking beside her, his hand warm in hers. Outside, the rain had stopped. Weak sunlight broke through the clouds, turning the wet streets silver. Someone had organized flower petals. They showered down as Clara and Rowan emerged, sticking to their clothes and hair. "To the reception!" someone shouted. The reception was being held at Rowan's townhouse, a calculated choice. Not neutral ground, but his territory. Their territory now. The house had been transformed. Every room blazed with candles and flowers. Tables groaned under elaborate food. Musicians played in the ballroom. Guests filled the space with conversation and laughter, and the particular energy that comes from witnessing something significant. Clara and Rowan greeted people for what felt like hours. Her face hurt from smiling. Her feet ached in the new shoes. But she didn't care. This was her wedding, her celebration, her moment to claim publicly what she'd already claimed privately. "Duchess?" Lady Ashford appeared at her elbow, using Clara's new title with obvious pleasure. "A word?" They moved to a quieter corner. Lady Ashford studied Clara with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You've done well," she said finally. "Better than I expected, frankly." "Thank you?" "That's a compliment, girl. I've been watching society marriages for 50 years. Most of them are transactions, boring, predictable transactions. But you," Lady Ashford smiled, "you've made it interesting, made people think. That's rare." "I didn't mean to make it interesting." "No, You just meant to survive. But in surviving, you've changed the game. Lady Ashford gestured at the crowded room. Every woman here who's ever felt like a second choice, like a compromise, like she wasn't quite good enough, they're watching you. Seeing that it's possible to be chosen anyway, that's powerful. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I just wanted to be seen, and now you are. Use it wisely. Lady Ashford patted her arm. Come to my salon next week. We're discussing Mary Wollstonecraft. I think you'd have interesting things to say. She swept away before Clara could respond. The afternoon wore on. The sun broke through properly now, flooding the rooms with unexpected warmth. Clara danced with Rowan, then with Lord Thornbury, then with several young men who seemed genuinely interested in knowing her rather than just being seen with the controversial Duchess. She was talking with a group of women about educational reform when she saw Vivian standing alone near the windows. Clara excused herself and crossed to her sister. You came, Clara said. Vivian turned. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her composure hanging by a thread. I almost didn't. Mother said we should leave as soon as the ceremony ended. Why did you stay? Because I wanted to see if it was real. Vivian's voice was barely audible. If you were really happy, or if you were just pretending, like I always pretend. Clara studied her sister, this woman who'd been her tormentor and her template, the standard she could never reach. Vivian looked smaller somehow, diminished by her own perfection. Are you happy? Vivian asked. Clara thought about it honestly. Yes, not perfectly happy, not every moment, but fundamentally, deeply happy in a way I never was before. Because of him. Because of me. Clara touched her sister's hand. He helped me see it, but the happiness comes from finally being myself instead of trying to be what other people wanted. Vivian's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her perfect cheeks. I don't know how to do that. I don't even know who I am underneath everything Mother built. Then maybe it's time to find out. It's too late for me. It's not. You're 24, Vivian. Your life isn't over just because one duke got away. Clara surprised herself by feeling genuine sympathy. But you have to want it. You have to be willing to look foolish, to make mistakes, to be imperfect. I don't know if I can. Then I'm sorry for you. Clara squeezed her hand once, then let go. I hope you figure it out. I really do. She walked away before Vivian could respond, back to Rowan, who was waiting with 2 glasses of champagne. Everything all right? He asked. Yes, better than all right. Clara took the champagne and raised her glass. To new beginnings. To choosing them instead of accepting them. They drank, and Clara felt the last piece of her old life fall away. As evening approached, guests began to leave. Lady Ashford departed with promises to send invitations to her salon. Lord Thornbury clasped Rowan's hand and told him he'd chosen well. Others offered congratulations that ranged from sincere to perfunctory, but Clara found she didn't care which was which. Finally, the house was quiet. Clara stood in the drawing room, still in her wedding dress, looking at the remnants of the celebration, flowers wilting in their vases, champagne glasses abandoned on tables, the debris of a day that had changed everything. Rowan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Tired? He asked. Exhausted. Exhilarated. Both. We did it. We did. Clara leaned back against him. Though I keep expecting someone to announce it was all a mistake, that I need to go back to being invisible. You could never be invisible. Not to me. Clara turned in his arms to face him. Do you ever regret it? Choosing me instead of the easier path? Never. He said it without hesitation. Vivian would have been an easier Duchess, probably. More polished, more connected, but she wouldn't have been my partner. She wouldn't have pushed me, challenged me, made me want to be better. I don't make you better. I just argue with you about philosophy. Same thing. Rowan kissed her forehead. You've given me something I didn't even know I needed. An equal. Someone who sees me as Rowan, not just as the Duke. Someone who cares what I think, not just what I can do for them. That's basic decency. It's rarer than you think. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet house. Then Clara said something she'd been thinking about all day. I want to do something with this, with being a duchess. Do something how? I don't know yet. But Lady Ashford said something earlier about women watching me, seeing themselves in my story. What if I could actually help them? What if I use this position, this visibility, to make space for other women who feel invisible? Rowan pulled back to look at her. What did you have in mind? Maybe a foundation. Something that helps young women access education, especially those from families who don't value it. Or a salon like Lady Ashford's, but more accessible. Somewhere women can discuss ideas without being dismissed as frivolous. Clara's words came faster now, ideas tumbling out. I don't know the details yet, but I know what it feels like to have thoughts and know where to put them, to be smart and have that treated like a liability instead of an asset. You want to change how society treats intellectual women. I want to change how intellectual women treat themselves, how they see their own worth. Clara met his eyes. Is that too ambitious? It's perfect. Rowan's smile was fierce. And I'll help however I can. Money, connections, political pressure, whatever you need. You don't think it's foolish? I think it's the opposite of foolish. I think it's the most important work you could do. He cupped her face in his hands. You were invisible because people wanted you to be. What if you help other women become visible because they choose to be? Clara felt something settle in her chest. Purpose, direction, the beginning of a future she was building rather than accepting. I love you, she said. I love you too. My brilliant, argumentative, impossible wife. They went upstairs together, leaving the mess of the reception for the servants to handle in the morning. In Clara's room, their room now, she realized, Mrs. Blackwood had laid out a nightgown and turned down the bed. Clara changed behind the screen, her hands shaking slightly. This was their wedding night. She knew theoretically what was supposed to happen, but the reality of it made her nervous. When she emerged, Rowan was already in bed, propped against the pillows. He'd removed his formal coat and cravat, his shirt open at the collar. He looked younger this way, less imposing. Come here, he said softly. Clara climbed into bed beside him. He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Are you nervous? He asked. Terrified. Me too. That surprised her. Why would you be nervous? Because I want this to be good for you, and I'm not entirely sure I remember how to... He trailed off, and Clara realized he was blushing. It's been a long time, since Eleanor. We'll figure it out together, Clara said, like everything else. They did. Slowly, carefully, with more fumbling than either expected and moments of laughter that broke the tension. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about them had ever been perfect, but it was real and honest and theirs. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Clara felt complete in a way she never had before. Not because Rowan had fixed her or saved her, but because he'd given her space to become herself, and she'd done the same for him. Clara? Rowan's voice was sleepy. Thank you. For what? For not being who I asked for being who I needed instead. Clara smiled into the darkness. Thank you for seeing the difference. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, two people who'd been chosen by mistake and chosen each other on purpose. 3 years later, Clara stood at the same window where she'd watched London wake on her wedding morning. But everything was different now. Below, in the garden, Rowan was playing with their daughter, 14 months old, already walking, already showing signs of her mother's stubbornness and her father's intensity. The sound of their laughter drifted up through the open window. Behind Clara, on the desk, sat correspondence related to the Whitmore Foundation for Women's Education. It had started small, a few scholarships, a modest salon in a rented room. Now it operated in 3 cities, had funded education for over 200 young women, and was gaining enough political attention that members of Parliament were beginning to discuss formal educational reform. Clara had testified before a committee just last week. She'd been nervous standing in front of those powerful men, but when she'd started speaking about why education mattered, about how many brilliant minds were being wasted because society valued appearance over intelligence in women, she'd found her voice. Several committee members had actually listened. The foundation was Clara's work, but Rowan had been right. She couldn't have done it alone. Lady Ashford had provided connections and credibility. Lord Thornbury had navigated the political landscape. Rowan himself had used his position to open doors that would have stayed closed otherwise. And slowly, incrementally, things were changing. Not everywhere, not quickly, but enough that Clara could see the impact, could read letters from young women who'd been able to attend university because of foundation scholarships, who'd found communities of other intellectual women who'd learned they weren't strange or unwomanly for wanting to think. The door opened behind her. Rowan entered, carrying their daughter, both of them muddy from the garden. "We encountered a puddle," he explained. "It was unavoidable." Their daughter, Eleanor Catherine, named for the two women who'd shaped Rowan's life, reached for Clara with grubby hands. "Mama!" Clara took her, mud and all. "Did you have fun with Papa?" Eleanor nodded enthusiastically, then wriggled to get down. Clara set her on the floor and watched her toddle toward her toys with single-minded determination. "She's going to be trouble," Rowan observed. "She's going to be brilliant." Clara leaned against him. "Like her father." "Like her mother," Rowan corrected. He kissed her temple. "Letter from your mother came today." Clara tensed. "What does she want?" "To meet her granddaughter. She says she's ready to—" what was the phrase? "Put past difficulties behind us." In 3 years, Lady Whitmore had made several attempts at reconciliation. Each time Clara had declined. Not out of spite, but because she'd realized something important. She didn't need her mother's approval anymore. Didn't need to be welcomed back into a family that had only valued her when she became useful. "What do you think?" Rowan asked carefully. Clara watched Eleanor stack blocks with fierce concentration. "I think our daughter deserves to know her grandmother, but on our terms, in our home, where we control the narrative." "That's very diplomatic." "I've learned from the best," Clara smiled. "Tell her she can visit, one afternoon, supervised. And if she makes one comment about Eleanor being too bold or too loud or insufficiently feminine, she leaves." "I'll write back today." They stood together watching their daughter play. Through the window, Clara could see the garden where Rowan had first told her she was worth fighting for. The library where they'd discovered they could be honest with each other. The hallway where he'd defended her against her own mother. Every space in this house held memories of becoming, of two people choosing each other repeatedly, in small ways and large ones, until those choices built a life. "Do you ever think about how different things would be if Vivian had said yes?" Clara asked. "Sometimes. But then I remember, if she'd said yes, I wouldn't have you. I wouldn't have Eleanor. I wouldn't have learned that the thing I thought I wanted was actually the thing that would have made me miserable." Rowan turned Clara to face him. "Vivian would have been a perfect duchess. But you're my duchess. There's a difference. She's engaged now, you know, to Lord Hadley." "I heard. Do you think she'll be happy?" Clara considered. She'd seen Vivian twice in the past 3 years, brief, awkward encounters at social events they both had to attend. Her sister looked the same as always, beautiful, poised, perfect. But there was something missing in her eyes, some spark that had never quite caught fire. "I think she'll be appropriate," Clara said finally. "Whether that's the same as happy, I don't know. I hope it is. For her sake." Clara did too. Despite everything, despite the pain and the betrayal and the years of being invisible in Vivian's shadow, Clara had learned something about forgiveness. Not the kind that meant forgetting or excusing, but the kind that meant refusing to let bitterness poison your own happiness. Vivian had been shaped by the same forces that had tried to shape Clara, by a mother who valued perfection over personhood, by a society that rewarded appearance over substance. The difference was that Clara had broken free. Vivian was still trapped. That was sad, but it wasn't Clara's responsibility to fix. Eleanor toddled over, holding a book. "Story!" Clara scooped her up. "Which story?" Eleanor pointed to a collection of fairy tales. Clara settled into the chair by the window with her daughter in her lap, Rowan leaning against the armrest beside them. She opened the book and began to read. But as she narrated tales of princesses and transformations and finding your own path, she thought about the story she'd tell Eleanor someday. Not a fairy tale, but the truth. About being chosen by accident and choosing yourself on purpose. About learning that invisibility was a choice, not a fate. About finding someone who saw you clearly and loved you completely. but understanding that the real magic was learning to see and love yourself. Eleanor fell asleep halfway through the story, her small body heavy and trusting in Clara's arms. Clara closed the book and looked at Rowan. "We did all right," she said quietly. "We did better than all right. We built something real." And it was real. Messy and imperfect and occasionally frustrating, but undeniably, powerfully real. A marriage based on honesty rather than convenience. A family built on choice rather than obligation. A life that belonged to them, not to anyone's expectations. Clara had arrived at Blackridge Hall expecting nothing. She'd left with everything that mattered. Not because she'd been rescued or saved or elevated by someone else's choice, but because she'd learned the most important lesson of all. She was never meant to be chosen. She was meant to choose. And in a world that had tried its hardest to make her invisible, that single act of choosing, herself, her happiness, her own worth, had been revolutionary. It had rewritten her entire destiny, and she would never be invisible again.